come to council meetings, that's a good thing. Believe it or not, I always thought, must be a bad thing, but it's a good thing. That means you're engaged, which is great. So I'd like to call the special council meeting to order at 6:31. I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the ancestral and traditional territory of the Lekwungen speaking people. And we're honored to have the opportunity to build strong working relationships with the people of the Esquimalt and Songhees Nation. May I have a motion that the agenda of the special council meeting of January 30th, 2023 be adopted as presented? Jordison and Ward. Any opposed? It's unanimous. We'll move on. I have no mayor's message tonight. I'm trying to get this meeting done here. So public participation, I'd like to invite members of the public to speak at this time. Comments related to the following matters that have been subject to public hearing are prohibited at this meeting. That's bylaw 1913 CD 33 2350 Souk Road. There were 4 written submissions that have been received after publication of tonight's special agenda, and they are appended to the agenda. Could I just get an idea of how many people want to speak tonight? Because two members have actually asked for extended time. So if I can just get an idea. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 6. Okay, so Mr. Roger Conrad and Mr. Jack Murray have requested an extra 2 minutes to speak. So may I have a mover and a seconder to allow them 4 minutes each? Jordison and Grove. Are there any opposed? Oh, Councillor Jensen, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. I forgot you're on. Councillor Jensen is here. He's on the TV screen. And seeing none, you both have 4 minutes to speak tonight. So if I can have whoever wants to come up to the first, just identify who you are, where you live.
Press, and we're on. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. I have a question. Sorry, Trevor Apperley, 3535 Promenade Crescent. I have a question concerning public participation. And my question is, and I don't know who to direct this to, but it's concerning both length of time that we have 4 questions, and it's concerning the placement of public participation on the agenda. My initial question then would be, is there any difficulty with moving questions to specific agenda items?
Mr. Earl, can I get you to respond to that question, first of all?
Thank you, Your Worship. My memory is our procedure bylaw guides the order of agenda and has placed public participation at the beginning of the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
The procedure for council, should you want to amend, you can either do it at a specific meeting and at the discretion of the chair, and then the assembled council or committee can make that decision, and or you could direct administration to return with an amendment to the procedural bylaw to guide such a change to apply to all meetings.
That would be excellent. The issue is this, John and Roger both presented relative to agenda items that were on the agenda for last week. They're both having to come back tonight to basically repeat what they did last week. Now, I know your time is valuable. I know you're busy people and you have a lot going on with your own schedules, but so do those of us who take the time to come out to these meetings. And I believe that our time is equally as valuable, and we're taking the time to try and help you with your decision making and making Colwood a better place ultimately in the long run. So that's my first question. The second question would be, in terms of length of time, is there something in place either by the bylaw or procedure that we are limited to just 2 minutes?
I can answer. Well, I'll let Mr. Earl answer that, but I know what the answer is. Mr. Earl.
Thank you, Worship. Perhaps I'll have our corporate officer, Marcy Lalonde, provide the specifics.
Thank you, through your worship. So the public participation is limited to 2 minutes with a possibility of an extension for an additional 2 minutes by unanimous consent of council. And that is in the procedure bylaw.
And can that be changed?
If I can continue, it can be changed, but there is a difference in procedure for the procedure bylaw. It has to go through public notice, so it has to go into 2 consecutive editions of a newspaper to let the public know that we're thinking about changing it and what those changes are before it can actually go through. So there is some costs associated with making a change to the procedure bylaw.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if I could just add something else on, Trev, it's, when you see the advisory committee set up, you're gonna see a lot more dialogue happening around the table. That's where it should be, because we're gonna have quite a few more citizens that sit on these advisory committees. So I think that is another methodology. It's just that I think the whole reasoning behind the 2 limitation was, they're trying to compress these council meetings, because we're by bylaw, we have to do a unanimous agreement to go past 10 o'clock.
Sure.
And
No, I
that's tough. So anyways, just to do city business. So I think you're going to see a big change in that. And hopefully the committees will be, by the end of February, a lot of them will be stood up. There's 6 already that have been stood up. So
No, that's great. And I think most of us who are here and who take the time to come out are really looking more for a conversation, more for a dialogue, rather than us coming up here, making comments, and then we hear nothing as to, at least that historically, that's been the case. I don't know that that's the case. So.
thank you very much. The next. Councillor Ward.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, in light of the fact that this evening there are only 2 agenda items as a special meeting, I thought perhaps we might motion that we see the community participants to see if there is anyone that's planning to speak to the active transportation network plan that wanted to wait until that point. And anyone who wants to speak to the Royal Beach Park plan would obviously be up first regardless. So perhaps this evening we could grant a special exception if need be. So I'd make that motion if anyone wants to second.
Councillor Olson. Any discussion on that? Okay, seeing none. Any opposed to the motion? Seeing none, unanimous. We can't do that, right, Ms. Corporate Officer?
Yeah, my apologies. Sorry, Councillor Jansen's having a hard time connecting to the meeting. Yes, you can, if that's what you choose, if you do it by unanimous consent.
Okay.
So is that at the very beginning of each item?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
All right. Thank you very much for extending my speaking time by another 2 minutes. So that kind of goes, sorry. And I also don't have any issues with coming up and speaking every week if I have to get my point across. All right. So good evening. I am going to read from my notes here just so I stay on track. I did have some slides to show, but I understand that I'm not allowed to bring those up, but you have received a copy of the kind of alternate proposal that I have to my submission. So good evening, members and your worship. My name is Jack Mairi and I live on Kenning Court with my wife, 3 children and my niece. My wife and I were both raised in Victoria, and we have 2 daughters who attend Dunsmuir Middle School. One of them who just graduated from Sangster Elementary, and a son who's currently in grade 10 at Royal Bay School. We are part of Colwood. I'm here today with the support of my neighbors, pretty much this whole row here, or not row, the whole aisle. And we're impacted by the proposed park plans being brought forward this evening. In addition to the points that John will be presenting and presented last week, my neighbors and I are particularly concerned with the current proposed trails above perimeter 9 in the map below, which you can't see. We are also concerned about the newly added cul-de-sac off Machosen, but that's for another day. We all feel completely blindsided with the placement of the trail that's placed right along the back of the side of our property lines. We all have very large windows, and many have lived here for over 15 years. This will completely violate our privacy and our right of enjoyment of our properties. Although my family have been here all our lives, we moved to Colwood 3 years ago, which was a dream of ours. As young adults, my wife and I would drive up here and kind of say, hey, we want to live here one of these days. Well, that dream materialized for us 3 years ago after many years of hard work. So to have this happen is heartbreaking, if it's to happen. Before and after purchasing the property, we had contacted the city and Seacliff to understand the plans for the area. As I mentioned last week, we personally had someone from Seacliff come to our property 3 years ago and assure us that they would not build a trail or housing for that matter on the space behind our homes because the ground was not fit for that use. They said the trail would be built along the slope, similar to what you see on the image that I kind of provided. And the space behind our houses would be given to the city as parklands. Actually, I'm going to deviate from this a bit because today I went to a presentation from Seacliff and Reliance, and they showed us this plan and they talked about the green space and how it was going to be used for parkland before. They ended up changing their minds on that because of the idea that other portions, well, I believe it's because other portions of land can't actually be developed on. So they're deciding to give that back to the city of Colwood as the parkland for you all and us all to manage and own and have to take care of. Anyways, as I mentioned, I have 3 children in my home, and my young daughters are very concerned with people looking in on them while they walk by at any given time. All the new paths on the Royal Bay side.
1 minute remaining.
All the new paths that were built on the Royal Bay side all do go down the slope. And they give privacy to the long-term Colwood homeowners, much like my neighbors that were there prior to these developments, prior to even the properties being purchased. We are pleading with you not to approve this trail, not saying the whole park proposal's kind of sideways, but just that piece of it, please. Well, thank you very much for your time, and I hope that you support my views as my neighbors do. I do have one inquiry, and I don't know if this is just policy or practice or whatever, but I'm surprised that the presentation today for the parks plan is being presented by a parks member and not by the actual developer and the applicant. The reason why I say that is that if it comes from the parks member, it almost sends the message that this is a done deal. I know it's not, but you know, if anybody was to say, hey, Parks is coming here to present something, you almost think that, hey, Parks is building this. So I feel like the perception is just not very good.
That's 4 minutes.
Right. Well, thank you very much. I guess.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murray. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please. Mr. English.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. John English on behalf of the Royal Bay Homeowners Association. And I'm here tonight to talk about the parks plan, but I've spoken before about disconnected and disjointed thinking, disconnected and disjointed decision making, and how it can get us all into trouble. And so tonight, you're going to be presented by the developers with a proposed parks plan. I just want to remind everyone that the city of Colwood's vision and goals for its waterfront lands are to be developed into a world-class destination for residents in the region and for visitors to the region. This was done after the city and its citizens spent a lot of time, a lot of money, and many hours in community consultation to come up with an OCP that would be used to guide and direct development in our city up until 2038. And And the focus of this particular property, the Royal Beachlands, is to become a major focus of commercial growth for the city. And that's really important for us to remember because you all know, I know, that our city is overly dependent upon residential property tax. And that's one of the key things and reasons why the OCP was done the way it was done. So from our perspective, the city's made prior agreements with this and other developers. In this particular case with the developers, the Royal Beach Land, the city has previously agreed to triple the maximum residential density permitted in its waterfront lands and to also reduce the minimum off-street parking requirements that must be provided in some parts of those lands.
30 seconds remaining.
Any plans must be considered within the context of the overriding vision and goals identified in the city's OCP. Specifically, how are the developers' plans to develop the city's vision and goals for its waterfront lands going to hinder or enable the achievement of something that is core to the city's plan, OCP? And so it's within this context, we've had a number of meetings with the developers. Some of the meetings have been like today, were quite encouraging. Other times we've had some rocky discussions.
That is 2 minutes.
I guess I have to wrap it up. I would ask that our mayor and council keep in mind the overriding goal that the city has for this land. It is probably the most strategically important decision that'll be made for the city for many years to come. If we don't do it right, I think we'll all regret it later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. English. Next speaker.
Hi, Darcy Campbell, 3567 Promenade Crescent. I attended the meeting this afternoon too with the developer, and it was a very frank discussion, I think. I do have some concerns with the plan. They have at the amphitheater, they have 8 parking spaces. So this is a place where you could have events, you can have entertainment, and for myself, who is not all that mobile, and maybe half of our demographic in the area, that doesn't leave very many parking spaces. They say, well, there's 14 up a couple hundred yards up the hill. I can't walk that far. And I'm sure there's lots of our senior residents that can't either. So in an area, for example, where it's supposed to be an entertainment area and people to enjoy, how do you get by with 22 parking spaces total? And you have to walk 200 or 300 yards to even get down to it. Then I got to walk back up the hill as well. It's just I think they can do better. We tripled, or the previous city council tripled the size of the OCP density. My math says they said there was 2,805 residences. That's 56 and 110 people at 2 persons a thing. And that's on one half of the street. We have another 10,000 people on the other side of the street.
30 seconds remaining.
And so I would ask the favor of the council to maybe, if we can triple their density, maybe they can triple our park size. Use some of the area that isn't not usable to them more than what they're doing. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Mr. Mayor, I think I'm deferred to the application.
Oh, okay. You want your 4 minutes then? Okay. Anybody else wish to speak? Please, please.
I'll just be really brief. My name is Gina Paula, and I am a neighbor of Jack's and his wife Katrina. And we've lived in Colwood. I grew up in Colwood, moved away, raised my family in Colwood. And we are one of the longer term residents on Kenning Court. We were one of the first to build on the street. And so also in conjunction with what Mr. English said, there was a lot of public consultation on the Royal Bay Park lands, the Royal Bay development, et cetera. And I agree. I think that with that public consultation, that long-term strategic planning, I find there's been so many changes from the original plans when BCIMC first owned the property and then eventually sold it. So for us to find out through our neighbor, fortunately, who said there was this meeting tonight, we had no idea these kind of changes were happening. And we were certainly not aware that, you know, we were going to have a trail right behind our house. I understand people that are purchasing in Royal Bay now, they know I've got this house. I walk the trails all the time. I love them. I love what we're doing. But I think people are consciously going in and purchasing those properties, knowing that they're going to have a trail right there. Whereas we've lived there for almost 18 years, the bluffs dropped off behind our house. We watched, you know, the pit was still live when we moved in, and we watched that land be remediated with contaminated soil from the pit. We're assured that that would never be, you know, used. It would be saved as parkland for others to enjoy. So I did just want to reaffirm what my neighbor said. And I'm not a NIMBY, you know, I really think it's great what we're doing, but I also think public consultation and paying attention to our long-term strategic plan is important for the citizens of Colwood. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Please.
Mayor and Council. My name is Tim Wicks. I live at 3476 Grattan Road, and I'd also like to support the removal of the trail going. For me, I would have 100 feet of my property that would actually join that trail, and probably about from me to you, people would be walking from on my deck if I was sitting on my deck right now, right? So what's disappointing to me is the developers. We addressed this when they had the meeting down right at the ocean months ago. I think I talked to one of the council members. They thought, well, gee, that's a great idea. Move the trail away from the backs of these properties. And yet today, it's in their plan to keep that trail there. There's no reason why the trail can't be moved down, halfway down the bank, keep it away from the existing properties that are there. The other item I'd like to deal with is the fact of that flat area that we're talking about. Now it's been moved out of the parks. I've just recently built a house on that bank, and there was a survey done by Thurber Engineering, and basically that bank just met the requirements for me to build
30 seconds remaining
above it. And so there's also an issue and that was before the atmospheric rain that we're getting, right? So there's an issue of how secure that bank actually is. And is Colwood willing to take on the responsibility of that bank sloughing down into the houses that are built below? I think there needs to be some strong engineering studies on the security of that bank. And is Colwood, its residents, going to take the risk in the future of something happening to that bank? So
2 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers? Okay, seeing none, we'll get on to new business. Oh, sorry. Oh, come on up. Please. Mr. Willing.
Yes, Mr. Doug, Mayor, sure. Yes, my first night in Colwood Council meeting as a neighbor of in Colwood. Instead of Machosen, I came from the dark side, and I'm over here, and it's nice to say thank you. And this has been very interesting. discussion, but I would like to clarify one point here. The comment was made that there was contaminated material used in the area below the homes which they speak of. It really wasn't contaminated material. What it was the early days of the experimentation with biosolids, and the Silvis arranged for biosolids to be shipped from the GVRD in Vancouver, and I was involved in mixing the biosolids with other products or whatever else to do experimental patches of plantings in that area. And the only thing that did happen in there that would seem to be a little strange was that some of the biosolids did not cook out in Vancouver. So some strange plants started to grow in that area on the north side. And that was rectified over the period of time. But so that's the only contaminated material, except for down below on the seaside on that same area. There used to be a berm down there, and that was about 5,000 tons of oil contaminated material that was to be used underneath Machosen Road when it was built. And it never got used, but it was tested by Thurber, I believe. And over the period of this number of years, like 20 years, it is finally dissipated, I think, to the point where it can be used somewhere else on site.
30 seconds remaining.
Thank you.
Just a quick question, Mr. Willing. So whereabouts are these biosolids?
The biosolids are directly below the path going down to the beach on the right-hand side. There's probably about 5 acres in there that were involved in biosolids. We did use biosolids for other offshore work, but those were the only biosolids we used on site.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Any other speakers? Okay, seeing none, we'll get on to new business. And I understand we have Mairi Bosomworth is joining us by phone, but Yasmin, you're going to be doing the presentation. So over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Mairi Bosomworth, the planner and file manager for Royal Beach, will be joining us virtually. She has a stubborn cough that gets worse with talking. So today I'm going to do the presentation on her behalf, and she will be available to answer more specific questions you may have about the documents and the report included in your agenda. So I will do my best to go through someone else's presentation, and bear with me. So I think it'll be important to contextualize the development of this parks plan that is before you tonight within the history of this file or the rezoning of the lands. So the property owner came to rezone the lands back in 2019, and over the 2019 to 2020 years, there were ongoing conversations about the conditions of rezoning, all of which were included in a development agreement that was registered on title as a condition of the adoption of the rezoning. That rezoning process produced a Royal Beach sub-area plan. So it created a plan that could be part of the official community plan and guide the development of the CD 30 zone. So the comprehensive development zone 30 that was created as part of this rezoning. The portions of the sub-area plan that guide park development are included in Appendix B of your staff, of the staff report. And those speak to a broad concept around parks and provide high-level policies. Basically, the minimal expectations that came out of that high-level policy document is our conceptual parks plan, that is this one that is on the screen. And it a minimal expectation that there will be 4 neighborhoods, the landing, the bluffs, the waterfront, and the headlands. And that there were to be 10 special places throughout those parklands. I'll come back to the Parks Master Plan in a minute, because it's not the chronological sequence of how we landed where we are at today. So that, as I said, the rezoning created this development agreement, which is a contractual, a legal contract between the property owner and the city that outline minimal conditions, minimal requirements. And embedded within that development agreement are terms of reference, which are a further refinement of the specific elements and features that the council at the time wanted to see within each special places. So that terms of reference is that refinement of what specific features were to be included in each of those places. At the high level, the expectation has always been that this development would provide 18.9 hectares of parkland as park dedication. And of those 18.9 hectares, 17 hectares were going to be nature park or community waterfront park, and then 1.9 hectares would be neighborhood parks. I think it is important to recognize that those development agreement conditions and the terms of reference came and were put together as councils and staff's best effort at articulating a desire and articulating a wish list for the applicant to agree to. In the summer of 2021, council adopted the city's first ever parks master plan. So the Parks and Recreation Master Plan that is now the policy document that guides our expectations and desires around parkland in this entire city of Colwood. So this document is, it was our first assessment of the existing parkland and likely future uses and needs of the community in terms of park usage and the areas where we should strive to build on as it comes to parkland. So as we were provided with this document, the Royal Beach Parks Plan, we are looking at the terms of reference for guidance as to whether the developer has met those expectations regarding the 10 special places. And we reflect upon the Parks Master Plan, which is our 2021 most up-to-date policy to ensure that we are in alignment delivering what the expectation of the city has become as further policy has refined those asks. And I believe there is an appendix attached, Appendix C, that's a comparison of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan recommendations as it relates to Royal Beach. Ultimately, I'm not going to get into the details of each special place because I think the applicant will go over those details more at length. What I can say is that the proposed plan meets the terms of reference. When we look at it at a high level, they are delivering 10 special places, and they are delivering the features that were outlined in the terms of reference. The distribution and the location of some of those features has changed, but perhaps I will leave you with 4 of the areas that stand out to staff as the biggest elements that caught our eye and warrant discussion and attention. So the parks plan concept included visually, it included the corner, the northeast corner of the property as part of the parkland allocation, to the point that the City 30 zone has zoned that area for park uses only. So to be able to take that land out of a park use, that would need to trigger a rezoning application. So currently, despite the fact that it is conceptually shown in the draft parks plan as not park, it's only permitted use currently until the CD 30 zone is parkland. So in endorsing this park plan, you are not rezoning the property. It would simply trigger a rezoning process. And in endorsing this plan would just give us an indication that you are open to that conversation about rezoning and reassessing the lands at that northeast corner. I'm going to skip some of those. Parking is one of the areas where we believe that there's sufficient parking with the parking being proposed. However, is the distribution of parking that is an area of concern. So where these 10 special places are located with reference to the proposed location of parking, there is an oversupply of parking around, what is it, the headlands, or is that, yeah, the headlands, whereas more of the active and programmable spaces are located elsewhere on the site. One other change from the terms of reference, perhaps, is the level of maintenance. I think initially, when there were conceptual plans drawn up for the Royal Beach master plan community and what parks could be there, and as we developed the development agreement and the terms of reference, we had desired that maintenance for these parks would be minimal. And so the terms of reference embedded an expectation of maintenance that is lower than what we realistically think can be achieved. And this is through experience and working with the parks department and our understanding of what hillside park, steeply sloping parkland requires in terms of maintenance from our the parks department's experience in Latoria South and more specifically Royal Bay, Latoria North. So we have a better understanding of the level of maintenance that these lands would require, and it's greater than the terms of reference would had contemplated. And lastly, the community amenity contribution. So the Appendix J is a comparison of the terms of reference against the proposed parks plan as it relates to community amenity contributions and what are the type of above and beyond features or amenities that could qualify for credits against the community amenity contributions. So as part of this plan, the document includes some of those items as eligible for community amenity contributions. So in endorsing this plan, it is implicit that there is an understanding or acceptance that some of these features would be done with a CAC credit, going back to the developers, and that it's including interpretative signage, lookout points, special pavings, landmark features, and some of those elements. So this is it's something for council to consider and ponder as we continue the conversation. Ultimately, the staff recommendation tonight is not for a decision or endorsement, but more so for further conversation with the public to allow us to go into public engagement, to take this plan into the public, allow more time for council and the public to review and provide more wholesome comment and continue the conversation with the developer. But the developer is here tonight, so you can ask more questions and we'll take your direction, the questions that you have in your feedback, and continue working on this document. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jardin and Mr. Stovall are in the audience tonight. Do you wish to add anything further? Super, thank you.
Good to go. Okay, excellent. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council, staff. My name is Georgia Desjardins, and I'm the Director of Development with Seacliff Properties, who together with Reliance Properties are the owners of Royal Beach. And we are very pleased to be here this evening to present the Royal Beach Parks Plan. Also in attendance is John Stovall, President and CEO of Reliance Properties, as well as Joseph Fry, he's the principal of HAPA Collaborative, the landscape architects. I'll be handing it over to Joe shortly here, but I first wanted to just touch on a couple quick items. And actually, before I get into that, I also just would like to thank members of the community. We've taken this week to engage in a couple of extra opportunities, and special thanks to actually Mr. English of the RBHOA. He helped coordinate a really well-attended meeting today with, I think there was probably about 30 members of the community, and it was a really helpful, open conversation. So thank you for that. So to start, and just taking a step back to provide some context, as you likely know by now, Royal Beach is an expansive 134-acre oceanfront property. The city's OCP, which acts as a guiding document to help manage growth and shape change in a manner that helps bring the stated visions and goals to life. One of the goals is that the waterfront is a stewarded world-class destination for residents and visitors alike. The waterfront distinguishes Colwood and is the soul of the community. With that said, a world-class destination, let alone one of this size, scale, and complexity, can't be created overnight. Rather, it takes a series of steps, beginning, of course, with a clear goal and vision, and that's something we all share through the OCP. In conjunction with the OCP, the zoning and other supporting documents, such as this Parks Master Plan, ultimately create the framework upon which the long-term development such as this can respond, adapt, and evolve to rapidly changing market conditions, while ensuring the ultimate outcome of creating a world-class destination that celebrates and enhances the natural destination, celebrates and enhances the natural beauty of Colwood's waterfront, surrounded by a vibrant mixed-use community, is developed. So narrowing this all back down to really the purpose of why we're here tonight, and that is to specifically present the Parks Master Plan. A critical component in creating any world-class community is an outstanding public realm, something the park plan delivers on. And I just want to actually clarify here, the spectacular seaside of Colwood is extensive, diverse, and already world-class in many respects. What we're providing within our park plan is improved access, visibility, and enhanced programming along and around this waterfront destination. A total of 18.9 hectares of oceanfront and ocean view parkland will be provided over the build out of Royal Beach, improved with an extensive and interconnected trail network and variety of program spaces. The parks plan is defined by the spectacular seaside location, views, and access, while the programming is designed to complement the surroundings of each unique location of the site, while also providing flexibility to accommodate and host a wide variety of different types of events. The outstanding public realm, in combination with the built form density and mix of uses that will be developed, will establish Royal Beach as a local, citywide, and regional destination for shopping, recreating, and community gathering. Keep in mind, the park plan has been developed based on the terms of reference. It's not intended to provide detailed design, but rather represents the next stage in planning to further guide the phased build out and ensure a cohesive, top quality delivery of parks across the site. And of course, we'll be running through the park plan in more detail, but a quick overview of the team that's been involved. So it's a spectacular, but a very complex site. And we've compiled an exceptional team of consultants to work with us with HAPA Collaborative on board as the landscape architects who've led the design development and the creation of this parks plan. And finally, just a quick touch on the project promise or the project process. And I do promise to actually let Joe speak here in a moment. But following completion of the OCP and rezoning in 2021, we've been working closely with our team on the more detailed master planning, including, of course, creation of this master plan. Through this process, we've also conducted a variety of public engagement opportunities to further help inform the parks plan before you tonight. These included a previous in-person event in the summer where we had a great turnout of over 130 people. We've had some more casual walking opportunities with members of the community to join us on site. And again, as recently as this past week, we've had both a Zoom and a well-attended in-person opportunity to discuss with members of the community this afternoon. Overall, the feedback has been positive. And honestly, the most common question we actually get asked is, when will things actually start happening on this site? It's been very long awaited. We continue to move forward in preparing applications for our initial phases of development, which we expect to submit in the coming months. This is going to include applications for 2 6-story buildings and about 15 townhomes at the intersection of Commons and Machosen, as well as this 12,000 square foot commercial building, which in the short term is going to house our presentation and discovery center, along with an ancillary food and beverage opportunity. And that food and beverage opportunity is going to begin forming sort of that animated mixed-use streetscape that we envision down the Latory Boulevard and out across the waterfront, centered around that public plaza. With the delivery of this park plan, we finally arrived at the very long-awaited start of this development and the exciting point of starting to bring it to life. And given the public engagement that's been completed to date, and the fact this park plan ultimately delivers and achieves on all objectives and requirements as provided with the terms of reference, we would respectfully request for your approval of this park plan this evening. Sorry, over to you, Joe.
Thanks, Georgia. And thanks again to public, to your worship, to staff for your time this evening. I will try to walk through a number of slides here as quickly as possible. There's a lot of details to move through, but staff has done a nice job of summarizing some of the things that have happened along prior to this park master plan happening. The first of all is the park terms of reference here, which Jacqueline had outlined in fairly detail, but I think one of the most important aspects of this is that it really just sets out the requirements for our park master plan in a high level of detail. 18.9 hectares of parkland, 1.9 hectares of neighborhood park, 17 hectares of natural park, and a village plaza that is provided as part of that area. So that's all part of the terms of reference, and we are meeting those requirements. And the park plan needs to be in consultation with staff. We've met with staff over the 18 months in preparation for this work. And as Georgia mentioned, we've been meeting with the public as well, looking for your approval to really move this forward to the next stage in development. We've always looked at the TOR as a guiding framework, something that sets out the expectations, as Mr. English has mentioned, the goals, vision, and objectives of a world-class community, making sure that we meet the 10 special places and the program associated with that. That's all outlined in the terms of reference, and I can guarantee you that we have met those requirements as part of this park master plan. I don't think it can be overstated how wonderful this site is. It's an immense opportunity, amazing views, stunning natural assets along the coastal bluffs, and a continuous waterfront that will be connected to north and south along the waterfront. And so the opportunity, again, as Mr. English had mentioned, is an important one, and we see that immense responsibility to delivering on that, and the relationship to as you can see in this slide, between our property and also the leased land adjacent to it. So we'll be working with you at the city and with staff to really help to redefine that relationship. I do also want to remind everyone that we have the OCP, the Parks Recreation Master Plan, all of these other documents, but those two in particular as our guiding documents for the work that we've been doing over the last year and a half. A key in that is that we view this as a waterfront that is a world-class destination already. It's stunning natural features, and we are committed to this idea of creating a seaside village that meets all of these ideas of a really important civic, residential, commercial, retail, recreational focus for the entirety of Colwood and the surrounding area. Well connected by the road networks that we're introducing, but also through trail networks, cycling opportunities that link it both to the adjacent developments in Royal Bay, but north and south along the coast as well, which is part of a more robust public realm. So all of these things we feel we're checking the box on all of those things at a master planning level, and we look forward to the opportunity to really evolve those through schematic design and detailed design. those documents help to serve as the framework for our big ideas for this site. And I should also say that we've been working with architects, engineers, the civil engineers who defined the road network, the architects who started to develop the form and massing, and all of these ideas apply not just to the park plan, but to the entirety of the development, connecting with our neighbors, both up north and south, but across Matrosen Road, creating a waterfront destination that can accommodate the widest variety of events and activities, a network of diverse special places. We're really excited about the opportunity to restore this site to its natural condition, which industrial times, I think there's immense opportunity to really improve this through the park planning and telling the story of this site, not obliterating the history of this site as a gravel mine, but actually heightening its understanding and the reason why it exists in its form today. So really excited about the opportunities that affords us. The concept plan here, and I just really quickly want to highlight the three, and staff had outlined some of the changes, but three changes in particular from the terms of reference plan. You can see all of the 10 special places highlighted here. Starting on the left-hand side, the amphitheater site, many of us had the chance to walk the site. Council had a chance to view it as well in the last couple of weeks with us. We still view it as an important social and recreational space. We have fundamentally adjusted some of the neighborhood park amenities, children's playground, and moved it from number 2 to number 1, and consolidated all of that in a place that we feel is well served by the community and well connected to adjacent uses. So we still see the amphitheater as a really critical part of that infrastructure. One other major move we made with the Latoria Boulevard extension is in the terms of reference, there was development on both sides of the Latoria extension. We've suggested shifting the roadway southwards towards what we call the Storm Park to allow for views out from the intersection at Matrosen and Latoria, right out over towards the water and over development sites, so that we're preserving those views as you immediately enter the site and turn Latoria into a parkway that's in the park as opposed to adjacent to it. And the third change is number 9 is what we call the scramble. We have previously the park terms of reference had proposed a neighborhood park right at the waterfront edge, and we looked at the grades and have suggested moving that park to the bottom of the Matrosen bank, providing a connection back up. Some members of the public have raised the concerns around the trail, but I think that we feel we can address some of those issues. But we feel that this is a really perfect location for a neighborhood park that serves that part of the Headlands community. So those are 3 major changes. All to say, though, that the 18.9 hectares is still accommodated on our site, and that's not including the yellow that you see in the document here or in this plan. That is the lease parcel below our property line right on the waterfront. And we're meeting those, accommodating all those needs. This is just to overlay the previous terms of reference. You can see in the dashed line where some of those special places and neighborhood parks were located. We generally try to adhere to those locations. We've just, as I mentioned, relocated some of those amenities from place to place. But I think largely to accommodate issues of accessibility and issues of topography and grade. I'm going to go really quickly through this, and I know that there's a lot to cover, but the Bluffs area, these are just to highlight some of the special places at the south end. Number 1 is our amphitheater. Number 2 is the Bluff Lookout. And I really want to assure the public that we have always viewed the amphitheater as it's an amazing site with incredible views, incredible Douglas fir forest at the coastal bluff edge. We envision this as a space that can accommodate events and activities in the range of, we're guessing around 300 to 500 people. So it's not a small space. We see it as supportive to the events and activities that can happen in the village area, and well connected to the trail extensions that you see around these images here. The landing area and the storm park that we're proposing. Number 4 is the intersection with Latoria and Machosen, with again that big overview out over the ocean. Number 5 is the lawn and playground. So it's generally a flat area that we feel can be well programmed actually for smaller events and activities with a potential for a pavilion. A bandstand has been mentioned as the desirable item. And all of these things can be considered as part of the development, to the more detailed development of that. Number 6 is the termination of the storm circulation system. And we're envisioning that storm water can be recirculated. So it's not standing water, it's actually moving water, and really quite a wonderful environmental benefit to the community as opposed to just a stormwater function. And number 7 is the plaza, which is at the village heart, right at the end of Latoria, looking out over the ocean and the amazing views, and obviously well connected to the waterfront park below it. These are some of the views that are in the park plan. I hope I won't dwell on them, but one thing I will say is we're really interested in the industrial history of this site, and not necessarily obliterating it, but actually celebrating. And so we've proposed some ideas around land forming or terraforming that gives us a sense of what had happened here in the past, but turning that into an ecological benefit to us, with perhaps some trailheads to the tops of these that provide even more spectacular views. So really leaning in on the history of this site. The lawn and playground in the center is a centrally located, well-connected park, generally flat area with a playground that leans up against one of those forms. And we envision a potential for a washroom, pavilion, bandstand, or any number of those things. The landing pond at the end will be the terminus of our storm system just before it enters into the ocean. A lot of questions. Mr. English has brought a lot of questions around the Village Plaza, and we just want to assure everyone that through the work that we've done, both for this site, but also other plazas like this, we proposed a 2,000 meter central plaza. We feel that this is about the right size for the kinds of events and activities that can be housed in here. And just as a general rule of thumb, for a lot of the programming that we do for public space, we estimate about 1 square meter per person for large events spaces. So this plaza itself can house events and activities, farmers markets, performances for about 2,000 people, with the adjacencies of retail, commercial, coffee shops, restaurants right on the edges of it. But in addition to that, expanding out into the ancillary plaza areas to the south, also to the parking areas adjacent to Latoria or as part of an extension. And we've designed the street network to allow for that to be a closure, should we desire that in the future, so that it grows the area for special events. And of course, not to mention the lawn area down towards the water that can also further expand the area for public use to the order of 5, 8, 10,000 people. These are the calculations that we feel this village plaza can accommodate. So this gives us an immense amount of flexibility for the program of that space. The Headlands area, number 9, is the scrambled, as we had mentioned, with a future trailhead. And we definitely have heard, even this afternoon, from members of the public around the orientation of the trailhead, and the adjacency to neighboring parcels, something that we can certainly work on improving. But the scramble itself will climb up to the Grattan Lookout, which is almost 270-degree views out over the water. This would be a neighborhood park, a destination for kids, for families, and that tucks into the edge of the bank. And we see that bank as an opportunity to really revegetate that site, handle the issues of erosion control and wildlife conduit corridor for birds and animals. Lastly, the waterfront area, while it's not on our property, we see it as it is a lease parcel that the city of Colwood will be negotiating with the province. And number 10, the beachfront area, is part of our obligations for delivering on that. And we will, of course, be working directly with the city to deliver on this. We do want to say that The green line indicates the regional trail with a 4-meter wide paved surface that we can provide both on site on our property to complement any of the trails that might exist on the waterfront lot as well. Just the further expansion on the trails network, I just want to highlight that the red line is that trail that we had just shown, again, delivering on that obligation to provide interconnected and completely accessible in that particular in that area, universally accessible trail on our property. And the 3 connections across Metchosin at Latoria, but also as per the Parks Master Plan, 2 connections across Metchosin at the south and north end. Again, the orientation and direction of that path is something we can certainly develop, but that is as per the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. And we'll connect to Latoria Creek, etc. Concerns around parking, we just want to show that we have actually had in your appendix, Watt Consulting has provided an analysis of parking requirements for parks, and we feel we're meeting or exceeding those requirements. I'd certainly be happy to work with staff to refine this, but this is just to show that we are showing the light blue is parking within park sites themselves. The dark blue are on-street parking adjacent to parkland, so not adjacent to development, and the 72 stalls at the Village Plaza, which would be available for community use for large events and activities and also everyday uses. In addition, we certainly, and the OCP refers to this, is that we really want to diversify the way that people approach the site. This is just to show a 2-minute walking radius from all of these locations. And just want to highlight that the amphitheater is about 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes if you're climbing uphill to the future BC Museum site, which we know will have a surplus of about 100 to 120 stalls for the public to use. So in the event that there's a desire for larger events there, we can always utilize adjacent parking sites. This overlap of 2 minutes, I think, is something that we're cognizant of in terms of how we've laid out our park sites. Last slide, and I'll be happy to answer any questions after this, is we have been working, as staff has mentioned, with Parks Department to identify the levels of maintenance required. The red, about 5% of the park allocation, is going to require the most amount of maintenance, of course, as a Village Plaza, regular heavy use and regular grooming as required. 23% of it at level 3, and by the way, these are based on Canadian landscape standards of levels of maintenance as a document. Level 3 is more traditional grooming, mowing, regular maintenance at about 7 to 10 day intervals for parks and playgrounds. But almost half of the site, 47% of the site is we're proposing as a revegetated, naturalized type of landscape. And our hope is that the levels of maintenance will be maybe 10 to 14 days over in the first part of the establishment period, and then slowly over time will require less and less maintenance, similar to a level 5. And the level 5, by the way, are all the coastal bluff site areas that exist there today. So very minimal, low touch areas. So there's a lot of information that I've tried to cover. I thank you for your time, and I know I've gone over, but be happy to answer any questions that council and your worship may have.
Thank you very much. I'm going to open it to questions from council. Councillor Day.
Thank you. When Georgia started your presentation, she referred to your development as a world-class destination with enhanced programming. What programming will you be offering?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, thanks for the question. I mean, the park plan details the wide array of programming that we offered across the 10 different special places of the property. And so the program has been designed in accordance with the terms of reference to try to offer a wide array of different amenities to attract all sorts of different types, ages, abilities, and user groups.
So there is no actual programming. There's just the space that you're referring to, the parks themselves, that's programming?
The programming and the amenitization, I guess, yes, correct. And the spaces themselves provide the ability for the city to run whatever programming they see fit and appropriate for those various spaces.
Okay, thank you. And also in referring to it as a world-class destination, you mentioned that it already is a world-class destination. But you also talked about shopping. What kinds of stores and how many, and how did you decide on this goal?
Absolutely. Thank you through your worship to Councillor Day. The OCP really sets out a lot of really great guidance and language around the goals and visions, objectives of what the city would like to achieve at Royal Beach, and that we share through the OCP in that. In so far as the commercial density is concerned, so the built form, the uses are all allowed for per the zoning over the site. So the entire central core of the property that you see labeled as a landing here permits a mix of uses. We are envisioning the Latoria extension down the site to be an animated mixed use streetscape that sort of works your way down, centered around a commercial core at the Village Plaza. As far as the exact amount, the types of retailers and commercial users that we anticipate, it's hard to say, right? It's going to be subject to market demand over time. But we believe that this is going to be an incredible destination retail location, and that we have a lot of the sort of foundation and building blocks to be attracting great destination retailer type users. And ideally, I mean, I think some, office use, other commercial uses, I think there's a lot of potential on this site. But again, it's impossible to say what and exactly how many on this type of project.
So you have not developed a goal to achieve in terms of the type of stores or the number of stores that you want to achieve in order to have a world-class destination that would draw shoppers?
As far as the specific number, we have the vision, the intent, the building typology, smaller scale, more destination retailer types. And again, I think it's going to evolve phase by phase, depending on the market conditions, depending on the economic factors of what types of businesses that we'll be able to attract.
Well, forgive me, but that sounds like you're already planning to not achieve it. Because my experience has been that it's very difficult to achieve new bricks and mortar commercial development. And I think if we're going to plan on that as a goal, we need some more concrete ideas of how we're going to achieve that.
And I would just say, I mean, we are in constant communication with commercial brokers. We're undertaking a commercial demand analysis. We're continuously monitoring the commercial uptake and the types of tenants that over across the street at the Commons that they're attracting, that Colwood Corners is attracting. And so we're continually monitoring that. And again, in our first phase of development at the corner of Latoria and Chosen, we're going to be implementing a 12,000 foot building that is going to have an ancillary food and beverage component. And that's going to really start building that animated streetscape down Latoria Boulevard.
Thank you. My next question is around the big ideas. On your slide presentation, the first 3 photos were not anything like the site. So how is it that you're telling us that it already is a world-class destination, and yet it's pictures of somewhere else that you use in your presentation?
Thank you, Councillor Day, through your worship. We often use for reports like this, we've got a series of precedent images to kind of illustrate the idea, the form, the character, the intent. They're not always perfect, but I would hope that the illustrations that we've also shown, particularly with regards to the Village Plaza, are helpful in conveying the intent, the size, the scale of the plaza in itself. But it's often the case that we'll use images to support those ideas.
Yeah, so I'm just concerned that the topography is steeply sloped, and many of the pictures that you use are a fairly flat topography. So achieving the vision that you're presenting, it's hard for me to imagine that happening. in a good way on the site. So I'm just trying to push you on your words because I want us to realize the vision that I can see for this place. And I know that that's not easy. So the only way to do that is to have some very concrete goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Councillor Jensen virtually.
Thank you, Worship. You hear me all right?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Super coming to you from the state of Jalisco in Mexico, and it's balmy 22 degrees still. There's a lot of stuff here, and I do appreciate the staff presentation. I do appreciate the presentation from Seacliff et al. And I'm going to pitch a few things across the bow, and I don't think this is quite the time to get extremely granular as of yet. But I see the staff motions there. The motion that's recommended, which I'm going to support, is that we push this forward to go and hear what the public has to say without endorsing anything at this point in time. That's going to be my preference when we get to it. In no particular order, the amphitheater. Can you specify for me, because I heard it somewhere during the presentation, that is there going to be an alternate stage area that's planned down in the plaza area? Can you clarify that?
Through your worship to Councillor Jensen. So the amphitheater, the terms of reference sets out the parameters of what the amenitization or improvements have to be at the Bluffs Amphitheater. As far as the alternate like band shell performance stage opportunity, the terms of reference does dictate that a band shall be provided, and it's contemplated in special place number 5, the major storm park area. Exactly. So there would be one venue at the Bluffs Amphitheater, another venue opportunity at special place 5, the plaza, and then subsequently at the beachfront.
Okay, so that's interesting, and I think the more opportunities there are like this across the property, the better. But specifically the amphitheater, and we heard a very poignant presentation from the professional musician just a week ago, and he made some great points. And I have followed up with members of the community about this. But that amphitheater, I think it is a huge opportunity for us, and people are excited about it. How do we capitalize upon that? And I'll tell you what's on my wish list. I did mention it during the walkabout that the only washrooms I see in this property that are public are in the plaza area. Is that correct? Public washrooms.
Again, through your worship to Councillor Jensen, that's correct. There would be washrooms provided near the Village Plaza. The terms of reference does not identify a desire or need for washrooms, but again, as staff had alluded, that can always be negotiated through the CAC process.
So my grandmother, who's at the amphitheater, might disagree that the washroom down at the plaza may be sufficient. And we've walked that property, and I'm sorry if you're attending the amphitheater to watch a concert and you have to use the loo. By the time you go down there and come back, concert's gone. So that is something that I'm going to be watching carefully for. I do think we could do a better job of amenitizing, and I do understand Ms. Desjardins that this is a discussion, an ongoing discussion for the future. But I do want to see a washing facility within that 2-minute window that you had there. How about 2 minutes to go to the bathroom? That would be deluxe. So that, but then with the washroom, I would expect that area to have obviously the necessary servicing to go with the washroom. But beyond that, it was brought to my attention from the musician that having sufficient electrical supply to support entertainers down at the stage area. And he says to me, and it was a very great point because I just thought regular outlet would do the trick. And he said, no, for the equipment that some bands are using nowadays, you need 220 outlets. So again, I'm just saucing that out there, and I'll monitor for the future when we get a little more specificity. The parking, I think we've flogged that a tad. I'm sure some of my peers will have at that as well, but hard to call world-class, inspire a world-class artist to come there with 8 parking spots. Now, I understand that a lot of the guests that will be coming, will be walking or cycling or parking across the way. I understand that. So that's about it with the amphitheater. And I did see in some of the earlier renderings too that there was a nice viewpoint above the amphitheater with some railings and stuff like that. Is that still being contemplated?
Through your worship, the rendering of the amphitheater, there were railings in the back of the view that overlook the bluff towards the water. Maybe that's what you're referring to. But I will say one of the challenges with that site is the topographic change is quite drastic. And so, but to address your comments around or public's comments, I think we'd be working very hard to provide the most accessible and equitable access to the amphitheater. And part of that would be to provide barrier protection where it's needed.
My grandmother doesn't want to fall into the amphitheater. It's quite we walked that area. And you're right, the grade change is actually quite something. I'm going to move quickly here to respect everybody's time. The plaza. I love some of your ideas and thoughts around the plaza, and I did make a note here that 2,000 to 3,000 people. I think you covered that well. What size of washroom facility, is necessary or contemplated for the construction here? Is this sufficient to service 2,000 people?
Through your worship, are you asking Councillor Jansen about power provisions? Is that?
Sorry, can you hear me all right?
That's better, actually. Thank you.
I might have been sitting on my microphone, but the washroom facility down at the plaza that is in the, can you just paint the picture for us on that? What the needs, what your anticipated needs are, and the size, and how many, and are we there yet?
I'd like to answer the question, but I think it's a little premature at this stage in terms of the number of stalls or where they'd be located. But I would say that it would be built into the adjacent development. So not a standalone washroom, but actually built into the adjacent pavilions, or we have 2 levels as well. So we could have washrooms at the plaza level or maybe at the closer to a beach level. Yeah, so.
Sounds great. And obviously, if we are going to hold events down there, we'll be looking for some significant power supply again. I bring that up. Now, I did notice in your chart for that area, it said 5 benches. I hope those are 100-meter long benches. So,
if again, through your worship, Councillor Jansen, the 5 benches is actually referring back to the terms of reference. We find that somewhat odd as well, but we have designed benches that are 30 meters long. So certainly.
That's awesome. I'll leave that between you and staff, but it is something I noticed. Now, I'm going to flog this one again, Seacliff. No real mention in here about what the pathway or the walkway to the lagoon looks like or is anticipated, other than there's going to be some discussions with city staff for the future. I'm paraphrasing. I am going to suggest to you that my vote to help rezone these lands were partially motivated by the opportunity to make that connection, and some commitments were made in our chamber. And I just wonder if you can be specific about what you anticipate. I got page 64, by the way, here, if that helps. That's on mine, so it might be off by a little bit. It's just very limited, and it comes up in more than one spot, and it's a pretty line that points north, and then that's kind of where it ends. And I just wonder if you can fill us in on your position.
Certainly, through your worship, to Councillor Jensen. So We are absolutely well aware and remain committed to fulfilling that obligation to complete that trail connection from the Royal Beach property line through the Ocean Boulevard right of way. The reason it's not detailed at length within the park plan is because it's not our property. And so to start designing or ingraining things about off-site locations within a park plan, we didn't feel like that's appropriate for us to start, planning over someone else's land. So that's where we have noted it on a number of occasions. We're well aware of it. We've had numerous discussions with staff. And same goes actually as far as the leased lot discussion is concerned. And so the terms of reference set out a number of improvements contemplated for the lease lot subject to the park lease allowing that. We continue to work closely with city staff as far as potential transfer over or surrender of that lease, because a private developer cannot hold a park lease with the Crown. And so that's an ongoing and active discussion.
Thank you. I appreciate your candor. Now, the area, can we just get back to the Area 9 and the shifting of some of that park space there? Because it did catch my attention a little bit that we're moving a park that's near the ocean or nearer to the ocean, and we're pushing it up against the bluff. Do I have that right? And what's the upside for the community?
Through your worship, Councillor Jansen, the corner at the top of Machosen Road as it descends down adjacent to our site. Yes, it's been proposed, again, not part of the park plan, but obviously an outcome of the park plan, that is potential development site. And as staff has mentioned, that is not meeting the OCP requirements. If there was a desire from Seacliff and Reliance to propose this as a development site, it would require rezoning.
Sorry, not to interrupt, but I was meaning that I think you described it as the scramble area there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah. So the question was, we're shifting that from away from the ocean and pushing the people up to the bluff there. Now, don't get me wrong, I like the renderings and I like the seating and the hillside. I mean, everything looks great when it's done by an artist, but can you just explain the philosophy there? Sure. And what the meaning is, or what we're trying to achieve, and why we would move green space away from the ocean, I guess, philosophically, and put it up against the hill.
Thank you. Through the chair, the idea is to, as we're all aware, the grade change adjacent in the terms of reference site adjacent to the ocean, a very environmentally sensitive area, lots of existing trees and tremendous grade change that would make that site, I would say, inequitable in terms of its access. Whereas number 9, the site that we proposed it is relatively flat. It's at the bottom of the bluff, the bank, pardon me, and allows us the opportunity to get trails up at a 1 to 20 or 5% slope. So that is accessible, but the scramble itself could be a more direct route up. So if someone was interested in taking that route, it gives you a range of options. And secondly, I would say that the end of Grattan Street and the lookout at number 8 is a nice complementary space to those two. So you get this low condition and intimate condition with the playground at the base of the bluff, and number 8 where you get a chance to look out over the entirety of the
like
city.
that. So I like some of your renderings, and I like the ideas and the location of that play area. Looked extremely interesting. Now, when you say scramble, I picture a bunch of guys going downhill chasing a block of cheese there, wheel of cheese. Sorry, but I digress.
They're not included in terms of reference.
So I think I'm going to leave it there, but I do like many pieces of this. There's a lot to chew on here, and it's tough to sort of digest this all at once, which is why I'm going to, when we get to it, push to send this to the public so that to see if some of what I'm thinking is in line with some of what they're thinking, because we could be different in spectrum. I do really like your idea about the industrial features, and I did notice the waterfall, and I thought, what a creative use of And if you could reclaim some of the bits and pieces that even used to be on the site somewhere or replicate them and build that into a water feature, I think that would be spectacular. And Mr. Mayor, I thank you for your indulgence. Maybe have some more bits and pieces.
Thanks very much, Councillor Jensen. Councillor Jordison.
I just have some questions in regards to the trail that residents here tonight voice concerns over. I'm just wondering what could be done to alleviate that or to change that plan to some reassurance that it could be changed.
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Jordison. We actually had a great discussion earlier this afternoon with some of the folks who are here this evening. To be honest, it's been a new point. I know it was raised at some of the other public meetings, but I feel quite confident that we can locate the path at a master planning level. I think it's difficult to get into the details of what that edge could be, but I know that with the way that we grade the property, the way that we screen it, the pathway, if it were to be at the back of those properties, could be lower. We could screen it. We could provide separation so that it isn't an impedance to people's safety and privacy. But we also had a great comment that perhaps it gets relocated away from that edge and follows the edge of Machosen, still meeting that same crossing point, which is part of the Parks Master Plan. So again, these are all things that can be developed as part of our schematic design work post master plan. But happy to work with the public on that.
Okay, and I just had some other questions. So Steep Hill part that is by Machosen Road, what are we calling that? The scramble? The steep. So that comes with a lot of difficult maintenance for our parks folks. And I'm just wondering if that was something that I mean, I don't really feel it's park space. If it's something that we were to say, no, that's not acceptable as parkland, what could be done with that? Could that be just added into whatever is developed there? Like whatever building goes there, it becomes part of their land, or how does, what other options are there?
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Jordison. I think a couple items on that. So firstly, as far as the context of how the scramble is going to work, and granted the name has been sort of named to celebrate the scrambling aspect of the park, but really what is envisioned within the park plan is for the base of that to offer a playground feature, a lawn space on the flat ground, and then it would be a pathway network in a series of sort of boulders that kind of act as like a feature to celebrate the unique topography of the site as well. As far as the distribution, again, is the terms of reference laid out where and how the parkland should generally be allocated, inclusive of this space as well. And so this is, I guess, consistent in that regard as far as the allocation of the parks overall. I just wanted to clarify sort of the actual use of the parks improvements in that location.
Okay, and just my last question was, I think great waterfronts, destination, as in this case, is they're not dominated by residential development. And it's because they're supposed to be full of people all the time, and they're, with different things happening and that sort of thing, concerts and gatherings and that stuff. And I'm just wondering if these locations are the ones that we're at because there's too much development for residential. There's already been too much approved to put in there, that we're limiting our space for proper parks in other areas, or things that might make it better for the community, or larger parks instead of these little chunks everywhere. And I just wonder if that's also going to cause problems with going forward with the commercial development and the, the build out of that, do we have too much housing going on in this area? Is that maybe part of the issue?
Maybe I'll just respond, and Georgia, if you want to add to it through the chair to Councillor Jordison, I think it's fairly clear that the waterfront is a destination that already has and Seacliff and Reliance have ensured that public access exists now as we're awaiting development, and so I feel that. In combination with residential increase in residential living on the site, that this is a perfect location for allowing a lot of the events and activities that happen, as we've seen elsewhere on the Lagoon Road during COVID, where there's a lot of pressures on environmental edges. We can provide a village plaza that is best suited for the kinds of intense activities where people want to be. And I think that all of the adjacent development associated with the commercial retail frontages are really going to be consistent with providing that level of compact but lively use along the waterfront.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Got a few notes here. You'll have to bear with me, but thanks, Georgia. Thanks, John, for coming tonight, and for everyone else who's come to listen and take the time to speak. I would start off with what I've sort of written down as a good start for me, which, going in order, I think the gateway, as we would term it, with the views that go down the waterway to the ocean. I think that's great. I know it's expanded upon what it originally would have been. I know we don't live in Venice, so no one expected anyone to build on top of the waterway that was there. It inherently was going to form some component of the parkland, but I like the vision for that. I think, though, I keyed in on something you mentioned, John, which was about water movement, and I think for that to really realize its potential requires a bit more, but I think we all know that. Lighting and water movement, waterfalls, whatever it might be, that recirculation you spoke of. But I like that. And I like the sort of homage to the industrial heritage of the area on the far side and trail. So for me, that's, like I say, part of the good start. The lawn and playground section, number 5, the open space in the event area. I also like how that kind of opens up. And then just some getting granular, the small features of the landing pool area, the circular feature deck and public art. And I know, Georgia, at one time we had a conversation about, again, incorporating, industrial pieces from the heritage of the site that I think, would really lend itself to that spot well. So for me, those were good pieces, but I'm not there yet. So I'm going to go back to the beginning. And I think, John, you were pretty adamant that you viewed it as a world-class destination already. And that's where I think I disagree. It's a nice beach. I live there. I walk it all the time, take the dog there, but I've lived in Bermuda. I've lived in Australia. I vacation in Maui. This is not a world-class beach. It's even regionally, it's not a Long Beach. It's not a Sombrio or even a Mystic Beach, right? With its attractive features. It's a nice stretch of beach that people walk their dogs, but world-class it is not. So we'll have to agree to disagree on that component of it. I think also there's a high bar that we've set and previous council has set. I can't speak to the terms of reference. I wasn't involved in that at that time, but by very clearly stating it as a world-class destination and embedding that in the OCP, we set a high bar for you. And when you define world-class, which I think has been the struggle for many people to say, well, what is world-class? I mean, I look at the dictionary definitions and it's being of the highest caliber in the world, right? Something world-class is one of the best that there is of that type in the world. That's from Cambridge Dictionary and Merriam-Webster. So, both are very strong statements. It's unequivocal, right? There's no ambiguity on those. So that's where I think we're still a little bit apart. So again, when I consider that, I look at my key considerations, which almost verbatim to Councillor Jordison, great waterfronts are not dominated by residential development. And another piece I picked up along the way was that interesting retail is a key to attracting people to an area, and ensuring vibrancy. So when we talk about this parks plan, we inherently have to talk about the plaza because that's incorporated into the parks plan. But I feel we're remiss if we talk about the plaza in isolation. And you know, your graphics even show it with the, you know, the additional space that could be utilized in some of the artist renderings. The problem I have, and it feeds into what Councillor Day had spoken of earlier, is they're artist renderings. There's no guarantees. There's nothing to state that this will happen. And so for me, when we speak of the plaza, we need to speak about those other things. And a great example I'll give you, and for anyone who cares to look it up, is Darling Harbour in Sydney, Australia. I spent a considerable amount of time there. In 2018, they redeveloped it. It's a 20-hectare site. What they've incorporated there is many of the features you're talking about, right? That open air plaza, the pathways that lead into it. There really is no residential, but it's event space, water features, many of again, the things we're talking about, but there's a convention center, a theater, other public amenities, lots of outdoor seating, cafes, restaurants. So it in and of itself becomes the draw. And I think when I talk about the parks plan, what I'm looking for are small amounts of connectivity, the trails and little viewpoints and lookouts that feed into that world-class destination, which naturally in this site, it all flows down to where it all should happen. And we've got 72 parking spots down there. We talked about having 2,000 people down there. The math doesn't add up for me. It's street parking. So, you know, I think there's work to be done there. I know everybody's been very patient sitting for a while, so I'll wrap it up. But I look at, for me, the headlands, you know, we talk about that. That's the 9.1 hectares of park there. Again, I can't speak to the terms of reference. I wasn't involved in it, but that's 48% of the total 18.9 hectares. That's not an insignificant amount of park, which I jokingly refer to as vertical park, because even the artist renderings show it as kind of a sloped area where the scramble is. In reality, it's steep. You know, I've shouldn't admit this publicly, but I've been there. You know, I've walked it. It's a very, very steep site. It's going to present some significant maintenance challenges, I think, for the city, which come with costs. There's already been some land sloughing that's happened. I know a resident here who called in to report it. So I have strong concerns about that forming the core. And as Councillor Jansen alluded to, moving a lot of the activity or action in the site, parking on the site, everything up away from the main draw, which is the water, into the shadows of, you know, this steep hillside, which then could potentially be dominated by a wall of shadow from larger towers and residential buildings. So at the end of the day, I think for me, I don't want to get ahead of myself because I have all sorts of ideas about commercial on the ground floor of every building and all sorts of other design things, but I like where we're at. And I think that's why I wanted to preface it with the good start. I really think there's some great work being done. I think sometimes we can be so critical, we lose sight of the spirit of partnership and the willingness to do the right thing. But I'm not there yet. And so that's where I'll leave it for the moment. But thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Up, Councillor Grove, first time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Here we go. There's so much here that I've been fortunate. Thank you for the extra opportunities this past week to talk to you about various things tonight while listening. Much of what's said, of course, is out there and it's now come around enough times that I think we're starting to become familiar with some of the issues. One of the things for me with this amphitheater and the notion that the isolated southernmost amphitheater site could become a real focus to performing and large crowds, I think is difficult because of its geography, the physicality of the site. I would much rather see it in the one rendering a larger version of what's here in this proposal of the curved seating, which I believe is on the slope facing the sandy area with the mammoth sculpture. Yeah, which I believe is mostly city property, if not completely. Some of the seating is in your property, yes? Yeah, and you had drawn this one and you were talking about it holding thousands of people. Now it's close to washrooms, some parking, and other food amenities, etc. Sort of things that crowds, festival gatherings, great groupings of people would just fit. And there would also be space then presumably for a large stage and so on. I understand the money for that would have to come from somewhere. It's not part of the parks plan specifically, but I like the idea of the amphitheater, the little south one. as some kind of a destination for less formal presentations. I think that if you put 6 or 8 musicians on a small platform down there without amplification, you wouldn't hear them. And I also have a music background, but aside from that, I ended up as a baker, you know, I'm just a baker really. So I see this opportunity to focus, tying it all together so that you have this highly concentrated reasons to be there. And business for 40 years for myself, I had some great mentors who told me, make as many reasons for people to stop as possible. So you take that energy and you densify it into the core, where then your other areas, which then when it started to work for me, your whole plan was when I started to think that way, and you would explain to me how many people could actually fit the plaza, the pavilion area, that slope. So you have a concert going, you're talking like 8,000-9,000 people gathered. You can have shuttle buses coming. That was one question, but that's a transportation issue about getting people there in a way. Then the open lands then would automatically fill up. So you could actually have several sites going all at the same time. And I like that aspect. So for me, I think I have to see that village plaza and then the amphitheater, that stage performance venue in that central place somehow for it to work. And then that becomes the energy focus and the soul of the whole thing, perhaps. Another thing I was going to ask about is plantings, since we're on a park thing here. And I have the food background, so see great opportunities for all sorts of local, perhaps indigenous, but otherwise plantings, and could tie in with small little side trails to these slopes that they've hydroseeded them many times. I lived on Grattan Road back in the 90s, and when they first started this development, and they hydroseeded very early on, and it all died. Even the broom has trouble on that land. There's no organic matter, right? So anything you're going to make to grow stuff is going to have to be brought in. Or Mr. Willing was speaking about biosolids. Well, we could talk about different processing. We do have a lot of kitchen waste coming in stream, gets hauled off to Burnaby or something crazy. Well, maybe there's a more local company or something that could draw in. There's opportunities to explore that. And I think we had a bit of that conversation the other day. The scramble is, again, a steep slope, you all know, and you've got some flat areas there. So I like it, and the drawings look great if it can look like that and be like that. However, I'm wondering about the possibility of a solar park. You probably have room there for between 1 and 2 megawatts of solar power production. There was an engineer, and I worked with him on a bit of a plan some years ago. It was rejected by the developer of the day outright, but apparently BC Hydro would say, oh yeah, we can run a 1 or 2 megawatts into the main line because the main line is running out to Chosin there. So a solar park might be an idea because you can tie agriculture in with that a little bit, which is the growth of plantings, so on and so forth. Just an idea. And I think for me then to support it to move to public is fine, except for I want to know what option 2 means. Perhaps that's a question for Mr. Earl. But then I'll finish my comments there. But and thank you very much for the work and the time, and the opportunity to speak. That's a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Grove. I'll just ask questions and then followed by Councillor Dave for second round here. I just have some comments. Thank you very much for all the hard work on this. I can see there was a considerable amount of work done on the plan. You know, I guess I look at it this way, and I'm going to ask. Actually, the question is more for you, Mr. Earl, and what it is that. I guess the terms of reference are like what engineers call your spec sheet or your it's your spec sheet, what you want. But obviously we're so early in the game, maybe we don't know exactly what we want. But what is the process from here going forward now? Because I want to understand if we have a second chance at this, because things are becoming more defined now to me. And there's specific questions that are starting to come out. We're just getting smarter and smarter and smarter about this. Is there a second chance? Is it like, because we call this concept. So this is like a conceptual design review, what I would call a conceptual design review. Then you go into a preliminary design, and then usually we have a PDR, preliminary design review. And then we have detailed design, and then there's a detailed design review. So you have all these stopgap measures as you go along. It's just that check and balance. And a lot of the questions that are being popped right now are actually further down the line. It's like some of the questions I was asking you, Georgia. I mean, it had nothing to do with parks. They were roundabouts, for God's sakes, up on the top. So it had nothing to do with it, but you know, and I had to catch myself. I went, "Oh, yes, I'm getting away from what the subject is." But this is you know, if you look at the parks terms of reference, which is basically the spec sheet, that's how I looked at it. So I measured everything against the spec sheet, the terms of reference. So you're right. I will give you full marks on something because I went through the terms of reference and I went tick, 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 tick. You're right. You did it. But as we went along, we were, oh, we're not happy with this. We're not happy with this. We're not happy with this. So it's not that we're trying to, you know, get into your face about it. It's obvious what has happened here. So do we have another opportunity to tighten that up a little bit, Mr. Earl? I'm not too sure.
Thank you, Your Worship. Perhaps I'll provide a commentary and Jasmine can correct me when I get it wrong or provide additional information. Administration very much treat this plan like the master plan that we've done for the entire community. Okay. So this plan will guide the overall development of this site as it evolves over what is likely decades, plural, through the development process. Individual park plans will come forward at subdivision. And within that granular level of planning, we will get into the detail that is perhaps being described this evening. At that scale, council of the day will be given opportunity to approve specific community amenity spending on specific parks. To get those questions before you, detailed design of those parks will be needed. And so to answer your question, detailed design will come individually with parks plans as this development unfolds over years. And so whether it's this council or the next council or the council after that, that level of granularity will occur then.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies it. That I thought that's what happened. So, you know, we are getting down into the weeds a little bit, but I guess some of the issues that I do have right now still is, and it's not really for this time, and you can correct me if I'm incorrect on this. Well, what concerns me right now is, you know, one of the jewel pieces, and I agree with the comment, all roads lead to Rome. And so Rome to me is that core where the plaza is, you know, that's that world-class destination. So that's important to me. So everything, the trails, the paths and everything has to come together there to me. That's just how I see it. It's funny when I went across the council here and I said, so what does world-class mean to you? And I got 6 different interpretations. Isn't that, it's interesting. You know, I always thought, you know, to me, it was a Granville Island. And so, you know, and then I listened to what other people have said, and, you know, it's a little bit different. You know, everyone has a little bit different island or different ideas. You know, even a Sydney isn't bad how it's laid out, sort of. I looked at it, not, yeah, it was interesting. And then I got involved with the plaza because that plaza seemed like it was a big issue. And so when I got the chance and I called the city of Sydney, in fact, and I said, how big is that plaza that you have, you know, besides these 400 square meters? I went, oh, okay. So interesting. And as I told you, Georgia, I got a written response from the city of Victoria because I said, now I'm going to look on the other side of it. What's the size of Centennial Square? Because that's big. And they said it's 7,500 square meters, but they said it doesn't include, it includes the land the CRD sits on, the parking lot, you know, the McPherson Playhouse, and it includes all that. So when you take all that away, whatever it is, 4,000, 3,000 square meters. Oh, okay, so I guess this is right. So my next question that I do have for you, Mr. Earl, I was trying to get to this point right now. So are there standards, like how did we come up in the terms of reference? Like we said 1.9 hectares for parkland, 17 hectares for open space, green space. Where did we get those numbers from? Where did they come from? Is there a standard? So I wondered where those numbers came from.
With respect to standards, I mean, certainly the landscape professionals can provide that advice. That said, in 2001, as described, 2021, council adopted a recreation master plan. Within that master plan, there is standards established if we consider comparing to others, how much natural parkland per community member or per hectare of community, how many sports fields per. And so through that analysis, Colwood has established targets on what type of park per capita we should have today, what those deficiencies are today. And as we anticipate growth, where we think those deficiencies might manifest. And so then we use that document to guide administration as we work independently and with the development community to bring new parks in to try to fill those gaps.
Okay, I understand. So we set them then through our analysis then. Okay, just wanted to make sure. So I guess the second question to that is there an opportunity at all for us to change that if we wanted to, or is it too late again?
Sorry, Your Worship, don't fully understand the question.
Well,
That's,
we say it's, the 1.9 acres, we looked at this, it's not, for parkland, because 1.9 hectares for the parkland is what I call the usable space for our citizens. That's what it is. It's the flatter areas. Am I correct? That's how I see this, basically, because the other parts are on slopes, basically. So the majority of that's on slopes. So that's not really usable. So I guess the way I look at it is it possible, because of what type of community that is, to, what if it was 2.6 hectares instead of 1.9 hectares?
thank you, Worship. I much better understand the question now. Council gifted administration and the development community with the terms of reference that has guided the conversation to this point. At the end of the day, any information that we receive and the development community receives from council or community with respect to whether or not that prescription is currently meeting your expectations, or whether that prescription should be changed, or whether the manner in which the current program is attempting to meet those expectations, that advice gifted to this room, staff, and the development community will come back listening to what you've said with options on how to potentially achieve new expectations should council provide those.
Okay, so bottom line is what you're saying, that there is a chance to change it.
Administration will work actively with the expectations that council sets, given, we're not at the start of the conversation, we're well into it.
Okay, thank you very much. Understood what you just said. So, and I do have a bunch of other comments, but actually these are for staff. So I'm gonna hand these things off, actually, to staff. I don't want to go through every one of them because they're actually not for you. Most of your questions I had for you, you had answered or have answered here to some of the councilors. So thank you very much. And I shall turn it over to Councillor Day.
Thank you. My questions are for staff because I already grilled you guys earlier. So if you'd be more comfortable having a seat, I'd certainly be happy to allow that. My question for staff is, it just actually twigged on me when you were talking about kind of where we are and where we're going. So this plan is scheduled to go with whatever recommendation we make tonight. The next step will be to get public input. And what can the public expect in offering that input? I'm just trying to determine a level of expectations for the public. So I wonder if staff could tell us what sort of refinements the public could expect to be able to achieve when this goes out for input.
through your workshop to Councillor Day. So we are seeking input, generally speaking, in the vision, whether this is delivering the vision that was agreed upon and is part of the official community plan, confirming that this is in alignment with those statements and the local area plan. And then just verifying what is the need, the desire, and then bringing it back to council. I think the terms of reference is a document that was created and we're actively working to fulfill. But I think it's opening up the conversation and then knowing that it is a partnership with a property owner and opening lines of communication to have an open conversation. And it may very well be that there's some expressed desires that will need to come as a CAC. So it's a community amenity contribution, like amenities that are above and beyond the scope of the terms of reference that maybe can be better articulated by the public, proposed by the public as to what other amenities would make those spaces more desirable, and that can be included within the scope of those deliverables. Ultimately, once these parks master plan is delivered, then we actively start subdividing land and then start the process of pricing out what those park dedication and amenities look like. And if we have a specific line items that we're looking to, the furnishing, so the 5 benches that we, so if the delivery of those spaces at subdivision will look at those specific bullet points, and the delivery will be very specific to those statements. So I think it's just about getting a more comprehensive understanding of what could enhance those 10 special places, and then bringing it back to council and having a good, wholesome place to go forward in terms of how would community amenity contributions be utilized to enhance the proposal that is before you.
Okay, that brings me around to my next question, which was about the community amenity contributions. So my understanding of community amenity contributions is that all developments contribute to the community amenity fund. And then we would be looking at which particular amenities within the Royal Beach plan would be eligible to receive funding from that fund. Is that right?
Yes, that would be generally correct. So every development in Colwood contributes to a general amenity fund. And then when there is a proposal like Meadow Green Park is a good example, that the public washroom in that park was not part of the scope of works of the developer, but it was funded through community amenity contributions.
So I will just say that there's been considerable evolution for Colwood. So when the master development agreement was done for Royal Bay in around the year 2000, that was when the city moved towards parks being part of developments and were not just land that was given to the city, but needed to be a fully developed park. And that is how we achieved Latoria Creek Park. That's how we achieved Perimeter Park and a number of others. But what did happen over time is that we bumped up into the limitations of what the developer could afford to do at that time. And so the plantings, for example, were limited to irrigated pods that eventually did not survive, unfortunately. So I think it's really, the only reason I'm telling this story is to make it really clear that it's really careful, that we need to be very careful in what expectations we create and also in being very clear in what sort of input we're looking for from our public. So I think it's important that we realize that in order to do all of these lovely amenities that we're looking at, all of Colwood's development is contributing to realizing that vision. So I just want to make sure that I was clear and that I'm headed on the right path. So one of the things that I hope that is not the result of tonight's meeting is for us to just kind of send this out to the community without saying anything about what we as a council think the vision should be. Because if we just put it out to public and then it comes back to us, I think we will have missed an opportunity to address things that we may see and agree that we all see in the plan. So when we have had this come forward to us, the report identified that the community park definition in the Parks and Recreation Master Plan is a minimum of 1 to 5 acres in size for a community park. And I think we're all talking about the focus being in the waterfront center of the Royal Beach development. And that is much smaller than what would sustain that community park designation. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. So the terms of reference were developed with terms like neighborhood park and nature park without giving it a definition regarding size or a specific scope. And then a year after that endorsement of the terms of reference, we created and council endorsed the Parks and Recreation Master Plan that then deliver a more wholesome assessment of what should be classified as a community park and what is expected of a neighborhood park. So there may be some misalignment on the size of those amenities with respect to our new standard, which is the Parks and Recreation Master Plan.
Excellent. And when you, as the planning department, are envisioning a world-class destination, that's a word that we have all used and that we all maybe think of a little bit differently. How do we capture our vision for a world-class destination? Is that something that we need to give you by way of a motion, or is that something that's defined some other way?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would hope that some of the work that we've been doing around our waterfront kind of park and vision, I would hope that it is captured within that more grander expectation of Lagoon Road all the way down the whole stretch of our waterfront. I would hope that that documented is ultimately one of the guiding documents. It hasn't been endorsed by council, but it has been work in progress to define that vision. So I think finalizing that document would help us guide what is the expectation for the entire waterfront in Colwood, of which these forms a very key, important piece.
And I'm wondering, in terms of thinking of what's been successful in Colwood in the past, Eats and Beats has been obviously very successful. And I've never actually counted. Do we keep track of how many people park at Esquimalt Lagoon when we have Eats and Beats?
Thank you, Councillor Day. I believe we do. I don't have the answer at my fingertips, but I do. We have estimates from this past year and previous that we can return to chambers with.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see that, because I think that gives us a pretty good concrete idea of what we need to be able to accommodate to to create this world-class destination and ways that we might facilitate it being possible to actually host, events where thousands of people would attend. I think that's it for my questions. I have a motion whenever we're ready for
Okay,
it.
thank you. Counselor Jensen.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I'll be brief. The Village Plaza, and this, I'm not sure if this is for staff, for the proponent, but do I read it correctly that according to the guiding documents here, that Village Plaza is to be constructed or construction is to commence within a year of the completion of this plan? Did I read that correctly?
Through the chair to Councillor Jensen. So the terms of reference have some timing triggers, and the completion of the Village Plaza is tied to it. Within 12 months of council endorsing this parks master plan, the expectation is that the plaza is a deliverable. So it would become the first deliverable with a timing trigger of 12 months after endorsement of the parks plan, as the document currently reads.
So if we stick to that plan, conceivably the plaza would get built perhaps years before a lot of the other stuff down there, as far as the timing goes.
So that's what the timing trigger would require, and whether the feasibility of building down to that plaza in absence of building the road network and whatnot. I think that is.
I was surprised to see that there, but I would like to at least that's interesting, the thought, and it speaks to some of the timing of some of these amenities, and this might be more for the proponent, but I mean it's always nice as a community to see that some of these bigger ticket areas are delivered early in the development as opposed to towards the tail end. So that's just a statement. I don't expect a response. Now, the redevelopment zone, potential area for redevelopment at the top of the hill of the chosen road. I think we've heard a discussion here tonight about some of the concerns about some of the steeply sloping areas that have contributed to the community or tended to be contributed to the community. Well, that spot up there is flat. And I see that as a valuable asset in our parks inventory. So again, that's a statement from me, but I would have to be extremely convinced that that would be the right move to allow redevelopment or rezoning up at the top of the hill there, as opposed to turning that into something for the rest of the community. Again, that's a statement. And third and lastly, I'm going to bang my drum once again, Mr. Mayor, about garbage cans. My expectation that garbage cans throughout this development. So all of our litter issues will be resolved. That's aspirational. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jensen. Just one other question for you then. What do you consider biggest risk areas for the city? Like, that's one thing that, like, to me, I think it's the slopes, the storm water system, and the third one is the waterfront, the crown land, because that's going to be transferred over to us for leasing, and that's what I see as the biggest risk areas for us right now as far as future liabilities. We have to really pay attention, and whether, like, when I'm talking about waterfront land, Are we gonna be putting a seawall in? What are we doing? Sand traps? What are we doing? Slopes? I understand there was a blowout one time and there was some issues there. And, I know, when we had those atmospheric storms there, that it got pretty serious down that area. So have I identified the 3 high risk areas? And so what is the timing of those? You give us the timing of when you're looking at the plaza area. So one of those other 3, I guess, the high risk areas to taxpayers, when are they going to be looked at?
So yeah, I would probably agree with your assessment of the biggest liability or risk or unknowns elements throughout the site. A lot of the investigation that is required to make the spaces safe for the use intended come at subdivision once you are preparing yourself to do land alteration. So when you are preparing to go and do an intervention on a site, then that's what triggers the geotechnical assessment and with an alteration in mind. So in absence of a plan to go and do something, there is no scope for an analysis to take place, right? So, but once there is a subdivision or when there is a trigger to then outline areas for development, and if it happened to be park, then there will be the scope of naturalizing the slope and stabilizing the slope. And through that subdivision and park dedication or road dedication, then we do an investigation through professional reviews.
Okay, that makes sense. How about the waterfront itself then?
So the waterfront will be subject to a lease that we will need to take over from the current, I believe the lease is held by the current property owner, and then we would need to do a new lease with the province to take over those lands and management of those lands. And it's a lengthy process by my understanding, and perhaps Iain Bourhill is here and wants to speak more to that element because he's been the lead on those discussions.
Yes, please.
Thanks, Your Worship. Yes, the waterfront lease lands are identified as being key to really linking the upper sections of the park system with the foreshore. The existing lease is a vestige of the industrial development that required a jetty and a loading facility. So it's not suited for a park amenity type lease. The hope is that we're able to negotiate with the Crown and Seacliff, essentially an extension of the existing park lease that constitutes our waterfront park along the ocean side of the lagoon, and then move that southward, a continuation of that same type of park lease in front of Royal Beach.
Okay, so, but if you look at the current infrastructure, now I'm getting down into nitty gritties, unfortunately, but if you inspect that right now, that's where it's crumbling right now, right? So I guess it's just, to me, do we have an idea of plan of what we're going to be doing then with that then? It's certainly not a question for the developers, definitely us.
Yes, thank you for that question. Really, I think you're probably talking about the area in front of the exfiltration pond.
Absolutely.
Yes. So we've had discussions with the developer about the necessity to retain that as a feature through the development phases of the project. How we deal with it in terms of that future area as a park is yet to be determined. Certainly, we want to make sure that the city, by taking over that area, is not subject to liabilities stemming from the developer's necessity to maintain that pond and any risk to its stability through storm activity and whatnot. We want to make sure that it's buffered and resilient to those types of effects from sea level rise and storm activity. But we're not there yet in terms of finding solutions in terms of integrating that.
So would that be part of the stormwater plan then?
No, just we've had early discussions internally about how to approach this with the further detailed design of the parks in this area. And we think that it would be appropriate in 2024 to look at budgeting sufficient funds to support the more detailed planning for this area in the park lease. We've had initial discussions with the Crown. However, we do think that next year is the year to really dedicate specific resources to this issue.
Thanks very much, Ian. Councillor Day, you wish to make a motion?
Yes, please. I think there's much discussion yet to happen on the provincial lease part. And I'll just remind everybody that it was a provincial order in council that began the entire expectation of the belief of this community that everything from a chosen road to the water line would become a park in the future. And that was the subject of an order in council in the 70s that held up until the 80s, and also the subject of a lawsuit. So there's a lot. But my motion is that council directs staff to work with the proponent to produce a revised draft plan that achieves the following. One, being that the Parks and Rec Master Plan suggests a deficit of community park and a surplus of neighborhood park, that the usable park area allocated for the plaza, special place number 7, the landing pool, special place number 6, and the lawn and playground, special place number 5, be increased to meet the community park definition in the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, which is a minimum of 1 to 5 hectares in size. 2, that the natural parkland areas located in steep slopes be reduced by exploring options, including a Section 219 covenant instead of park dedication, to compel the establishment and maintenance of steep slopes as open green space. And number 3, that page 77 of the draft parks plan be amended to clarify the trail typology of the off-site connection to Esquimalt Lagoon, and that this improvement be included in the scope of the plan. That's my motion.
Marcy, can you put that entire motion? Thank you. Just take a little time just to read this before I ask for a seconder.
Site should be off-site. Third bullet.
Says site right now.
Yeah, it says site. It should be off-site. Yeah.
So can I get a seconder so that we can open this for discussion? Councillor Ward, okay, seconds it. Would you like to motivate, well. Okay, would you like to motivate Councillor D? Then I'll go to you, Councillor Ward.
Thank you. So my motivation for this is to give staff and the proponent a chance to work together to come up with a better version of this plan that addresses both liability and for the city and some of the steep slope concerns that we have been hearing about, as well as to solidify our expectation since 2021 of this trail actually connecting to Esquimalt Lagoon in the future. And I know there was also some considerations that were discussed about the amphitheater, and I'm happy to have those come as a second motion or even as part of this one to create an amphitheater that is better. However, I do think that the proponent heard all those comments, and since they are already, we're not progressing beyond tonight's stage, staff would then have the ability to have that discussion with the proponent to come up and include that, the needed, services to ensure that any amphitheater that we build in Royal Beach would serve the needs of the performing community.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I seconded the motion because I certainly agree with the first two bulleted points, particularly the second. I think that's long been my concern, has been, I call it the vertical park, and I have from the outset, and I think I've been upfront about that with the proponents as well as fellow members of council. I just don't see that as viable parkland for the community. So I agree with that, and certainly bullet point one. Again, I go back to my fairly long-winded talk about what a world-class destination is and having those special places. Third bullet, honestly didn't research that, but I'm happy to support that. My only remaining concern, I think, and to some extent feeds into what the folks brought forward tonight over here, is the flat section at the top of the headlands there that, again, it's not the topic of discussion tonight, but having removed it from the parkland, it would naturally move it towards rezoning. I don't know if we need to include it in here, but I know that the proponents have heard the community concern about that. I have very significant concerns around traffic, access off Machosen Road to a little cul-de-sac there. It just creates one more headache in an area that's rife with headaches, thanks to some a lack of foresight from some other folks in the past, but I won't get into that. But I do have significant concerns about that. Whether or not it needs an amendment or another motion is another matter. I suspect that everyone's heard loud and clear that I think the spirit of what we're looking for is there. So I'm happy with how it stands if the message is known.
Any other comments? I just, the only other one is, would be the comments made by Mr. Murray. I guess, is that, again, that's about the trail and the potential of moving that trail up top near their backyards down further. I think I heard it very clearly from the architect that it's possible, I guess, and that it would be looked at. I don't know if you need it as part of this motion or if you can look at that and get back to council on that. Yes, please. Yeah, please, Georgia, if you want to.
Through your worship, I'll pass it over to Joe to just respond on that matter. But I would just like to clarify with the first 2 points here. The city's OCP does provide a land use designation map. And within that map, again, the parks and open space are again reiterated as far as where the general layout are to be located on the Royal Beach lands in conjunction with the Seaside Village designation, in conjunction with the neighborhood parks designation. In addition to that, the development agreement, which is registered on title to the lands, clearly sets out the parameters and the requirements as far as the overall park plan delivery and the requirement that that park plan deliver on the requirements as set out in the terms of reference. And so I just really want to clarify the various levels of relevant documents that have dictated the last, the creation and delivery of this park plan ultimately.
And sorry, I was trying to decipher the motion while you were speaking, Your Worship. Could you just repeat the question regarding trails?
It was just the question, the point brought up by Mr. Murray. It was on Kenny Court, the trail being up
Yes.
in the near their backyards, and I think I heard you mention that you can move it. I was just asking council if they believe this should be part of the motion.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So sorry, I full pod here. I shouldn't have let you. I thought you wanted a clarification on what's been. Sorry about that.
To clarify, I think the trail, yes, we can go through a process to work with the neighbors to address any concerns that they have, and I think to their satisfaction.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Worship, and I'm struggling. I don't want to do a disservice to the community in the sense that I don't know what the overall impact of some of this is. I would have preferred to have this ahead of time and digest it, and there's a lot of stuff there, and I don't know what the impacts are. I don't know what the impacts are to the plan, work that's been done up till now, how it relates to the previous guiding documents, whether we end up in a legal pickle. So I'm struggling, and I guess my inclination is, if I'm struggling that hard, is to not support this. But I just wonder if we can hear from Mr. Earl or the appropriate staff member whether this is even achievable, or if this violates some precedent or one of the documents that we've established previous councils have laid down the groundwork for. So.
Mr. Earl, could you respond to that?
Thank you, Worship. I think as already described, kind of the official community plan lays out land uses, and depending on the scale of changes that are envisioned at this motion, we may be then contrary to the land uses that are established in the plan. So the degree to which this change is moved forward, it may impact kind of the layers of regulation that are already guiding this, whether it's the DA or the official community plan itself. That said, administration are happy to work with the proponent to move forward should this motion pass, but it may trigger an OCP amendment or other such regulatory changes.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Day.
Thank you. For Councillor Jansen's comfort, this motion was available to you last week when this was scheduled to be on the agenda, but we didn't get to it. And it does come from the author of the report, our planner, Mairi Bosomworth. And it is specific to my question to her. This is exactly her response to me with regards to trying to address liability, size of the parks, and future trail connections off-site.
Hey, Worship.
Okay, Mr. Bourhill.
If I may, and to clarify with respect to the third point, the trail connection that is proposed to connect Royal Beach to Ocean Boulevard is part of the waterfront stewardship plan. So staff expect that to come back to council with the detailed coastal engineering analysis that was requested next month. So there will be that for council's review at that time. The plan that was brought forward in 2021 called for a raised boardwalk in that section. And the boardwalk was costed and included in a application to the federal government for grant funding in 2022.
So, Councillor Day, would you like to edit that? Then?
I'm just trying to understand.
So what he said is basically what the waterfront processes committee is actually tackling that very point, and it's gonna come up in the plan at the end of the month. So, go ahead, sorry.
It's all right. So I think my intent is really about accessibility. If this is already coming back by another process, we certainly can strike the third bullet from this motion. It will be achieved in the course of the other process, but because we were talking about it in the context of our Parks and Recreation Master Plan, it just seemed like it made sense here, but if it's coming from a different spot, it doesn't matter to me. We just need to get the right kind of trails going to the right kind of places.
Okay, great. So are you agreeable to a friendly amendment then? Strike it. And the seconder, Councillor Ward, are you okay with striking it? Yeah. Okay, that was a yes. Councillor Ward?
Well, now that we're in the habit of striking things, reflecting on it, my main concern, as I said, was the slopes in the plaza. And I don't know where anyone else stands. I'm less concerned about the lawn and playground. I feel that meets the parameters that were laid out. That's not a concern for me. I think that and the landing pool, I think, fit the definition. My primary concern, amongst future things that will take place, remains the plaza as the centerpiece of what should be a world-class destination, and the parkland on the slope. So I would look for a friendly amendment to remove the landing pool and lawn and playground, but I'm not sure if we have agreement there.
Okay. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I'd like to leave the landing pool and special place number 6 in there for the reason that taken together, they form a better environment for special events. But that's my preference. I guess it's not the end of the world. We're trying to give staff direction for how to work with our development community to create a plan that works for all of us. It has to meet our needs. It also has to meet their needs. So I'm just trying to provide clarity so that we could achieve a world-class destination where I feel that events similar to ones we already hold in Colwood could be held.
Councillor Ward, would you, any rebuttal on that? Okay. So seeing no other discussion on this, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion? And Councillor Jensen, are you in favor or against?
I'm on the fence. I'm going to be opposed. Thank you, Your Worship.
So let it be shown that Councillor Jensen opposed and the rest of council, Mayor, are for. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next one. I think I'll just take a 5-minute health break. And then we'll get on with the second part. Okay, I think everyone is back and I'm gonna open it up for public participation on this item again. And Roger, I believe you've got 4 minutes, Roger. Oh, you're gonna turn yourself on there, Roger.
My voice is generally loud enough anyway. And administration and staff. My name is Roger Conrad. I live at 309 Perimeter Place. Chapter 2. I wish to continue to speak to Mr. Bourhill's presentation on the ATNP and once again ask council to defer the acceptance of the plan until such time as the Active Transportation Committee has been selected. I'm not directly opposed to the idea in principle. I'm opposed to the idea in detail, lacking detail. In this proposed design, there appears to be no consideration given to the various widths of roads and street right-of-ways. And I've handed out some handouts to you. I'm referring to 1 and 2, nor to any physical barriers that may be encountered, nor are there any costs associated with the newly proposed bus stop from the minimum to the desired design, or the added cost, handout 3, for boulevards that need to be planted with grass, shrubs, or trees and then be maintained. Secondly, how does this recommendation dovetail into the master transportation plan in relationship to roads and feeder streets with limited right-of-way that need to be upgraded to handle the added traffic volume created by higher density? It would seem we are trying to set a gold standard for pedestrian movement on roads that may not be able to accommodate this standard by putting the cart before the horse, so to speak. If this design was proposed solely for Veterans Memorial Parkway with 35+ meter right-of-way, there wouldn't be an issue. But for other roadways, it will create and has created problems. As an example, on older arterial roads with limited right-of-way, such as Sioux or Machosen, as well as narrow feeder streets like Lagoon, perhaps there should be flexibility built in to the design where sidewalks, bike lanes could be reduced slightly in width. Perhaps elevated bike lanes could be considered and a narrow cement separation barrier be used. I'm referring to drawing or handout 4 and 5. In lieu of the 0.7 wide painted line barrier, drawing number 1, that affords no real safety protection to cyclists or pedestrians. In this proposed design, we will be giving 67% of Machosen right-of-way for 5.5%, Colwood zone figures, of the current number of residents using it. On an 18 mm wide feeder street, this design could occupy 75% of the road right-of-way. We simply can't afford to be this generous nor this frivolous. We continue to use the phrase engineer design or best practice, yet this, referring to handout 7 and 8, design has created traffic and safety problems at the intersection of Ben Homer and Machosen Road. On 2 separate occasions, due to a lack of road width created by the newly constructed wide sweeping sidewalk design, which is not set back to the property line, I've witnessed a transit bus stopped on Ben Homer, preventing a school bus from completing its turn off Machosen Road. As a result, part of the school bus was sticking out, blocking traffic on Machosen Road. In
30 seconds remaining.
these designs look good on paper. In practical terms, they don't always work. When you consider the number of neighborhood streets and roads in Colwood with their own unique physical characteristics that still require sidewalks and bike lanes, we simply need to be more flexible with the design and to also make sure all sidewalks are placed back adjacent to the property lines, especially on arterial and feeder roads. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Conrad. Anybody else wish to speak from the public on this subject? No. Okay. I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Bourhill, to introduce.
Thank you, Your Worship. So it's my pleasure to present the second draft of the active transportation plan. This is a recap from the last time we presented this project in July of 2022. Tonight, council has the opportunity to consider adopting the plan and directing staff to start using it for master planning purposes. I'm joined tonight with Dan Casey, a transportation planner with Urban Systems, who led the consulting team that assisted staff with this project. Dan and I are available to answer your questions at any point in my presentation. As was presented with the first draft back in July of last year, the process to create the new active transportation network plan was undertaken to engage with the community and better align our infrastructure plans with current community expectations and needs. Update the network plan and guidelines to reflect new transportation master planning and best practices. To prioritize future projects in what we are now proposing is a 15-year capital plan, as opposed to what was previously proposed in 10 years. And lastly, to pre-plan for the upcoming transportation master plan update. This project was initiated at the end of 2021, and after the city first went through a process to define several active transportation projects to be constructed in the near term, these are now in the detailed design and construction phases. Council endorsed the first draft of the ATMP for the purposes of engaging with the public on July 11th, 2022. Staff subsequently undertook public and stakeholder engagement through the second half of the year and developed a revised draft before you with recommended changes that I will summarize later in my presentation. The overall structure of the plan contained these seven components that were presented back in July. Also staying unchanged is the plan's vision for a future community with safe, equitable connections between key destinations and neighborhoods that are highly accessible to all ages and abilities. Again, the 7 main objectives remain the same, with emphasis on ideas that are also exemplified in the official community plan. Also informed by the OCP are the active transportation network plans, design guidelines for sidewalks intended to implement the call for sufficient space to allow 2 wheelchairs or strollers to pass each other, and that incorporate opportunities for on-street parking, beautification, and tree planting. The plan's approach to cycling infrastructure would update our current standards to reflect newer provincial guidelines that emphasize the need to create protected bike lanes along arterial and collector roads and along with extensive use of multi-use pathways. And once again, to recap the 4 big moves the ATMP would represent for the community, which again remain unchanged from the first draft. These include city-led upgrades to the Galloping Goose Trail, including the new bridge over the Island Highway, an emphasis on complete streets on major corridors, and an overall elevated design quality for universal access and careful prioritization of projects. Since getting council's go-ahead to seek public and stakeholder input on the first draft, staff used our community engagement platform, the Let's Talk Colwood website. We also directly engage with stakeholders and other jurisdictions identified in phase 1 engagement, and took the draft plan to several community gatherings. Oops. I had some fun pictures that were of our Let's Talk, or excuse me, we had an Eats and Beats kiosk that was very successful in terms of hearing from well over 100 people. And then staff used all this collected information to inform the recommended changes of the second draft. The most significant changes to the second draft are the 2 new sections. First is a section 6.22, which calls for on the city to carefully consider integration of new protected bike lanes to ensure that challenges to persons with disabilities are adequately addressed. The diagram included in this section, also shown on the screen here, shows the updated floating bus stop design guidance in the BC Active Transportation Design Guide. It contains minimum and desired design elements for this type of infrastructure. This new section also calls on the city to continue to apply evolving best practices for accessible design and engage with interested community members and our Intermunicipal Advisory Committee on Disability Issues, also known as IACTI. The other proposed new section 6.7 addresses the potential for new multimodal road infrastructure like protected bike lanes to impact the passage of emergency vehicles. It calls for the strategic use of mountable curbs and collapsible bollards and careful consideration of required response times in the design phase to minimize impacts. The other significant changes relate to the 10-year capital improvement plan that is now, as I mentioned, proposed to be a 15-year capital plan to address the higher reassessed cost estimates. As you can see on the priority project maps and tables contained within pages 63 through 67, some project resequencing to align with current active transportation capital projects, such as what's happening on Owens and Ben Homer roads, and the need to balance costs has been made. This has not led to the delisting of any city projects included in the July draft, not already part of a capital improvement or planning project. However, these changes have led to a more financially attainable estimated average annual cost of just under $1 million for non-DCC projects and $2.4 million for development costs chargeable projects. Other changes based on input from the community and internal stakeholders includes various minor revisions for clarity and to make corrections. The addition of hard packed gravel that reduces rolling resistance as an acceptable surface for multi-use pathways in appropriate situations like natural areas. New wording to coordinate with the region on the formalization of elephant feet road markings to demarcate cyclist crossings at places like the Galloping Goose Trail. You can already see those incorporated into neighborhoods like Royal Bay. The addition of secure bike lockers in the list of desired end of trip facilities, and reference to the updates to the priority projects and capital plan. And lastly, deletion of the previously included Appendix B, which outlined development cost charge projects that have been replaced with a new column in the priority projects tables. So in terms of next steps, we are now at the end of the anticipated project with a second draft active transportation network plan refined through the benefit of significant community input. Staff are recommending that council adopt the January 2023 version of the ATMP for master planning purposes now, so that it can be shared with the community and used as a guide for transportation planning and design, including the 2023 update to the transportation master plan. That concludes my presentation, and both myself and Dan Casey are able to assist in any questions you have.
Thanks very much, Mr. Bourhill. Councillor Day.
Thank you. First question is, why were the development cost charges removed?
Thank you for that question. So we actually added a column to the priority projects table such that it would differentiate between which projects that are within the priority list are actually DCC applicable and which aren't. The previous appendix just listed all of the DCC projects that would be potentially involving active transportation infrastructure.
Okay. And we've spent quite a bit of time getting here, which not a criticism, but I'm concerned that, you know, I guess the first transportation master plan, I think, was 2015. And what we figured out at that point in time really was what we would like to see on our roads. And this is kind of in the same vein. The problem with that plan is that it has not clearly identified areas where we have insufficient road right of way to achieve that. So I'm just wondering why we don't look at what we have first and then what we can fit in it instead of doing it this way around.
That's, yeah, good.
Thank you for that question and through the mayor. In terms of looking at the available road cross section, that was very much part of the process when we were looking at different priority projects and the costing. Some projects included considerations of land that would need to be added to the cross sections. And in certain cases, we looked at priority corridors where constraints would require flexibility in the design. What you see in front of you in terms of the policy inherent in this document are very much aspirational goals as it relates to AAA facilities, facilities that are going to, as much as possible, encourage people who have potentially perceived cycling and walking on our streets as dangerous. But so we have very much standards that are meant to aspire to those future conditions where people are much more comfortable and feel much more safe. That being said, we completely recognize the need to be flexible given the built-out nature of a lot of our road network to work with what we have, and in certain cases, take design choices that wouldn't be that gold-plated AAA facility.
So I guess I'm still having trouble understanding just our whole approach. So if I was tasked with developing a system that would handle, you know, X number of cars, X number of pedestrians in a specific area, I would probably start by looking at what have I got to work with, and then, you know, identify areas where, you know, we need to do something innovative, or perhaps we need to attempt to acquire more right of way, or whatever our strategy may become. And I think that's where we are getting to eventually. I'm just trying to understand if there's a benefit to envisioning, you know, your highest and best possible design versus envisioning how do we get more cars from point A to point B, or more bicycles safely through an intersection, or more kids walking to school.
Thank you for that question and through his worship. Really, there's, as I said, a series of standards, there's objectives, and there's goals that are included in this document. When it comes down to making decisions about how to apply them on a road by road and street by street basis, that's going to come at the design phase. In our validation of these ideas, we did look at existing cross sections, and we're confident that many of our existing 20 meter wide, 30 meter wide cross sections that are carryovers from the days prior to incorporation will be able to accommodate many of these types of facilities. But as I said, we understand not only the spatial constraints, but also the cost constraints that come with these improvements, and we will have to make some trade-offs. We've already been in touch with some project managers at the District of Saanich to learn about their application of curbing that retrofits existing roads to provide for protection of cyclists as one of those potential design responses to constrained right-of-ways.
Okay. And lastly, so the transportation plan is coming forward, and our active transportation plan is here. Where we get down to that design standard, where we're looking at specific roads or intersections, or, you know, how this is going to work. Some of what we heard from our public presenter here tonight is kind of related to those specifics. So he mentioned a school bus coming around a corner, and being held up and therefore sticking out into traffic. So that might be something that, you know, when we're just looking at the road cross sections, widths and whatnot, isn't obvious to us. So how do we get that public feedback from our residents who maybe live on that street or on that corner, who know the kinds of things that happen all the time, to get that pulled forward into our planning?
Thank you for that question, through the mayor. The iterative process in the design phase, I understand, does involve outreach with the neighbors that would be affected by the capital plans. I know that in the current phase of projects that were directed to be undertaken in 2022 have in certain cases involved outreach with property owners, not only to advise of the potential changes, but also to learn exactly what you're talking about, the local knowledge about the function of roads. So I know that that is part of our approach to that level of planning, and certainly happy to take direction from council as to how we could shape that further.
Perfect. I'll leave it to others. I think we have a committee coming for this, and I really think we're going to have to work hard to balance, you know, the people who drive down that road every day because they live, you know, 10 blocks further down or whatever the distance is, and what people who live right there want. And we're going to have to be pretty nimble, I think, to do that. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Day. Councillor Ward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think Councillor Day spoke to a couple of things that I was going to touch on. The committee being one, you know, certainly would like to if the timing were different, you know, or maybe it can be different to have them engaged on it. But me specifically, you know, I was looking at it, and you mentioned, you know, it's kind of the gold standard, and I can appreciate that. I think what you see in there, in perfect world, if you've got the money and the roads are the right way and everything else, we would aim for that, right? But we know in Colwood we're a little cash poor. You know, we've got other challenges there. We've got legacy infrastructure that, you know, really challenges you to achieve that mark. So I'm thinking there's an opportunity maybe to formalize kind of the silver standard and the bronze standard. And you alluded to it already with, you know, the Saanich, the bike lane mechanism that they've implemented. And I know Mr. Conrad had shared that in his information to us. Big proponent to that, you know, just to find a way. For me, it's about finding the balance between, okay, we can't afford the gold standard, we don't have the width for it. Can we still, you know, encourage some mode shift and protect cyclists in a more cost-effective way that frankly still leaves, you know, more drivable space as well? We find that balance, I guess. So I'm thinking if there's an opportunity to put in the silver standard, it would be welcome. And then my main concern, and less so, you know, directly with this plan, I think when we talk about the priority projects on sidewalks and cycling identified in purple as priority one is Machosen Road. And I would go as far as saying, like, I'm not convinced our master transportation plan is the transportation plan that we want to stick by. So I'm a little concerned that we start investing heavily in sidewalks and cycling lanes on a road that could easily be 3 lanes and potentially should be 4. You know, this is where I know I have a 180-degree difference from many of the last council and certainly our last mayor. I don't see the traffic going up Latoria to Veterans as necessarily the best option. So I just don't want to put the cart ahead of the horse, and I could be alone on this one, but you know, it's certainly my perspective is that we should just be cautious in implementing something too fast if there could be a significant shift in how we view that road. So just that's my only thought, and I know we'll have an opportunity, I think, to speak to the master transportation plan, but give you some insight on certainly where I'm thinking and maybe others as well.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ward.
Your worship, if I may.
Yes, please, Mr. Earl.
Sorry, thank you, your worship, and through Councillor Ward. With respect to specific projects, administration always returns to council in advance of scoping to affirm a particular sidewalk project is envisioned in a particular corridor and the cross-section that council either previously endorsed or that's contained within the transportation master plan suggests this, and we will affirm that direction prior to scoping, which occurs prior to design, which occurs prior to detailed design. So early on, this is a standard that is kind of the opening hand, if you will. And this, having this standard inform us from a master planning perspective also allows us, when the development community knocks on the door and intends to develop a parcel, we indicate, well, here's the ATP standard in front of your property. And that allows us to suggest we need to acquire some additional right-of-way from you. So this allows us to start those conversations, but specific projects come to council for affirmation of scope prior to execution.
Councilor Ward.
Thank you. You know, Mr. Earl, I appreciate the clarification on that, and absolutely wanted to make clear that I like keeping the gold standard there. I don't want that to be seen as a dismissal of that. I think, again, going back to what I said, where you have the opportunity, you know, if a developer is ponying up, you know, if we're going to be blunt about it, you know, then that's where you want to do it. And we can see those different design elements in Royal Bay, for example, versus other neighborhoods. So, you know, my comment isn't so much remove that. It was, you know, in terms of realism, let's also, you know, consider what the next layer down looks like, so that we don't necessarily stall out either. It isn't about holding up projects. It's making sure that, okay, if we want to provide a protected cycling lane for children cycling to school on a key route like Painter or somewhere, we can utilize that Saanich kind of methodology and take action sooner rather than later. So I'm appreciative of the work, and I appreciate the you know, the clarity on the process. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I guess we don't say that. We don't use the analogy of Cadillac and Volkswagen anymore. Back in the days, a Cadillac was much better than a Volkswagen, but I don't know about today. But yes, and I do understand we have achieved a gold standard or platinum standard, and I completely understand that. I have a couple of questions. And I thought I was through with the review in the ATR, but it was interesting. I read former councillor Parkinson's notes. Very interesting. And he made me think a lot, actually. And I started questioning myself and going, boy, he's got some good points here. He's got some solid points that should be considered. Have you thought of them? Have you reviewed them? Have you thought of how, you know, the yeses and nos? Because it makes a lot of sense in what he's saying, because I do understand the cost of this. I mean, it's going to be a lot of money. And it's not that, I know you've got the window, the 10 to 15 year window, but you know, in the meantime, that doesn't put bike lanes in, you know, where we should have them in critical areas. And the idea of using those cement pad things that go up, you know, they're kind of ugly, but you know what? I'll take safety over ugly any day, you know, as an interim measure. So I'll tell you one thing, I you know, if I was a cyclist, I'd love to have that little cement thing there rather than two lines. You know, two lines are not going to stop too many cars. So that's my thought process on this. And so I don't know if there's a timeline on this, but I can tell you right now, this would be a phenomenal report to give to the new, well, it hasn't been formed yet. We're getting the volunteers right now, but we should have all the names in by the 15th. If we can wait, I'd love to have this referred to the Active Transportation Committee. I think it'd be a phenomenal project for them to take on, and lots of great players that have had some pretty solid input into this. I don't know what you think of that, if we're working to a certain timeline or not. So that's my question.
Certainly, I'll go back to address your earlier questions about Mr. Parkinson's letter. Yes, I very much appreciated his input and the detail that he went to in that submission. I did follow up with him and we discussed things. I think I certainly agree with a lot of his points around the cost, and that was a lot of the same thinking as why we made the changes in the second draft with respect to resequencing a clear definition between DCC and non-DCC projects, and then expansion of the time horizon to 15 years. Some of the points that Mr. Parkinson made got into areas that we would see coming in the next planning and scoping phase, as opposed to being addressed at this level. For instance, he talked about formalizing arrangements with third parties where we've got corridors that are on property that we don't control. You know, those are things that would be part and parcel with that next phase of planning. With respect to the involvement of the upcoming Active Transportation Committee, I think it is a huge gift for us to have that potential group be there to start implementing the plan. I think it's fair to look at the plan in its current state as a synthesis of both the community's expectations and the community's need, as well as other jurisdictions' expectations around facility standards like the provincial guide. So by bringing this forward to the committee, they're going to be able to hit the ground running and start advising council on a lot of the decisions that are going to be flowing from the implementation of this. And certainly if the committee wants to make recommendations to council about changes to the plan, I think that's totally fair game, and certainly wouldn't be seen as a negative thing from a staff perspective.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Grove?
Yeah, so thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. They pretty much covered all my items. I just kept ticking them off. So thank you. You've done some answers already. I like the flexibility that which you spoke to, because I think that for me satisfies much concern around the standard we're speaking, the aspirational standard which you mentioned. That flexibility I think is important. So I'm sort of accepting it as a broad statement, right? Assuming some kind of common sense would fit in a certain situation, or more likely a budget limitation perhaps. I like what I've seen, and I think that as we move forward to have a goal for what we want, and as I've seen the streets change to what looks like a new engineering standard to me, having lived on Machosen Road and walked it almost every day for 28 years now, the sidewalk that's there is a huge improvement. And I was probably very cynical because I thought, well, who can afford that, right? Well, here we have it. I can see how it's safer. The traffic is definitely slower than it used to be, and it doesn't wander off onto the gravel, threatening the lives of the pedestrians. So there's many, many improvements. So I don't know what else to say. That's more comment than question, unfortunately, but the questions did get answered that I was hoping to speak to. So I think I support this. Thank you.
Councillor Day?
Thank you. Just thought of my one last question that I forgot to ask, which was, when you're doing your plan, what sort of traffic volume does Machosen Road actually flow?
Great question. Happy to add the info that I have off the top of my head. We've been looking a little more closely at Machosen Road specifically as a corridor. We've been in front of council over the last year plus on that. I think I'm going off memory here, but latest counts, I think we're up above 15,000 vehicles per day on the busiest section, that being the section between Wishart and Sucro. And then it starts to decrease as you work your way further out toward World Bay.
That's awesome. I think that it's great. The other question I was going to ask was about amendments, whether the committee would be able to make amendments, and I heard that they are. I think Wishart Road is an excellent corridor for cycling, and it's something that may allow us to take advantage of future partnerships with other landowners to create something that gives a much better cycling experience than Souk Road can, just by nature of the speed of vehicles on that road. So I think that's great, and thank you.
Okay, Seeing no other comments, so I was gonna place the motion. If no one else wants to, but I think that I would like to make the motion that we refer this to the Active Transportation Committee, Network Committee, for consideration. I just know the composition already of who's going on it, the people that have volunteered for, and it's a wide range of bicycle people. So I like what I'm seeing right now, and I think, I think it would be very good. And if we're not under any time constraints, it's hopefully have this stood up by the end of end of February, and this would be a great project that they'd love to take on. Just talking with some of them already that wanna be on it. So anyways, that's what I'd like to move. Second. Okay.
Slight amendment
Okay, go
to
ahead, please.
propose that as well as being referred to the Active Transportation Committee, that it's referred to IACTI for their input on the accessible portions. I think you have it 90 to 95% right, but I don't like to go out on that limb because they are the experts, not me. And I just want to make sure that if there's any suggestions for improvements, that their voice is also heard.
That's a friendly amendment. I'm okay with that. So all one. Thank you.
Your worship, if I could just quickly comment.
Please.
So I should highlight there is a timing component with respect to the update to the transportation master plan.
Okay.
So that is a project that very much has this decision in its critical path. In terms of this document informing, as Mr. Earl noted, development processes and master planning decisions, we feel there is a need to articulate what our ask is from the development community in the near term, given that there's some significant projects that are going to be adjudicated in the near term. So I just want to highlight those. There are a couple of timing considerations. And I also note that we did bring the first draft forward to IACTI. I was back and forth with their chair several times, and unfortunately they had some internal timing challenges. And the document was shared with each of their members with an invitation to directly comment to staff. But happy to continue that engagement with that body.
Any other comments? Sorry, you want to speak? Councilor Grove?
Yeah, I'm just sort of a bit confused if he just asked for some time.
Speaking to your mic. Can't hear
Some
you.
specific time that this needed to be, or this occur. We've delayed this thing because it's going to committee.
Yeah.
So then I understand you need some time. Do you want a date or you want a deadline? Do you need?
Thank you for that question. As I said, it's really it's a matter of the workflow internally as to how we need to address this component of our overall transportation planning, and then feed that into the transportation master plan update. What staff's recommending tonight is that this be endorsed for the purposes of master planning. So really, we're trying to encourage council to move this forward as something that counts, that you're giving staff direction for to use for our overall planning purposes. With respect to the committee, seeing the need for changes and seeing the need for any amendments, that could certainly happen after tonight's meeting, and if staff's recommendation was one that came forward in a council resolution, we would see that not necessarily being a roadblock to the committee recommending additional changes to council, if that makes sense.
So what you're saying to me, you want us to adopt this, but geez, we'll let you amend this after then. Is that what you're saying to me? Yeah, an approval.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm very hesitant to speak against your motion in any way. I'm just highlighting an option for council to proceed in a way that allows us to start implementing through development and then master planning, while at the same time keeping the door open to changes that the committee may want to recommend to council.
Yeah, so my only reluctance, I guess, is that the comments I heard was, we have a gold standard and, you know, it's okay for the new developments to be developed that way. I could see that, but the older developments, you know, we just hate to see this applied because it's just, I have issues with that, but Mr. Earl, do you have a comment? I saw you waving your hand there, so.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is an important document, but it certainly isn't urgent. That said, I think what you've heard from Mr. Bourhill is this has the potential to delay by a couple of months, perhaps 3 months, our transportation master planning process. If we were to pause that while waiting for a committee to be formed and then to convene and then consider this issue. Perhaps an amendment to the existing motion to allow staff for the purposes of continuing our transportation master planning processes and conversations with the development community to consider this document as a guide in its draft form.
I'm okay with that. Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay with that. Yeah. I like that. Yeah. Marcy, can you change? Okay, so that's a modification. Okay. Well, I'm friendly with this motion, actually. It's what I really wanted in the end. Can you change that and just put it up on the screen so we know what we're voting on? I'll have someone make a motion here.
Sorry, Amanda, are you able to bring the motion up onto the screen?
Yeah, I'm just gonna do that right now. Just
Thank you.
So. Yep, 5 to 10. We got 5 minutes here, so I'm gonna hopefully get a mover, a seconder, and we'll vote on it. This is new. I just want everyone to start seeing the motion so you know what you're voting on. Yeah, well, we do it at the CRD, so I like it a lot. So, yeah. You'd learn something from there.
My computer is acting up a little bit, so it's not displaying properly. So I'm just gonna bring up another screen here. Oh, so strange. All right, I'm going to share this, but it's going to be small because it's acting funny for me.
I can see it now.
You can see that? To allow staff to continue the master planning processes with developers and consider as a guide, consider transportation. Guide in the draft form, it's draft form.
Right.
Your worship, if I may,
Yes, please, Mr. Earl.
the master planning, transportation master planning processes and work with developers. Those are two separate things.
Goodness.
Yeah, it should be a master transportation planning process.
I don't know why this is doing this. Okay, that counts.
Okay, on the very top, it should say allow staff to continue the master transportation planning process.
Okay.
Right. And work with.
Be used for master planning purposes and work with developers.
Yeah, yeah, that comes about staff to continue the master transportation. Yeah, it should be.
It's not perfect. It's close enough.
Okay, yes. Can we fix it, Mr. Earl?
Administration understand the.
Okay, thank you very
Okay,
much.
sorry, I
Oh.
can't hear what you were saying. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's fine. I hate to do this, but is there any other discussion on this? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Any, okay, unanimous. Thank you. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Thank you. Oh, boy. Thank you very much. Warden Grove. All approved?